Hey guys, VaulSC here, hope that you are doing well. In this video I'm going to be talking about the Combined Army, that glorious faction from Infinity the game, where you get to play as the alien race. I will be going through a bit of a guide and tutorial for new players about how to begin your collection, what maybe to purchase and what to avoid buying, and then of course I'll be going through all of the profiles, all of the loadouts, talking about the meta, and really discussing all things Combined Army. Now, to be specific, this is the vanilla Combined Army faction we're talking about in this video. I will not go into detail about the sectorials, the Morats, the Shazvasti, and Onyx. Maybe save that for another time. That does mean that I'm going to kind of lightly gloss over the units in this faction, which are more specialized for those sectorials and more useful in those sectorials, rather than going into every unit on its own merit. So, if you're kind of new to Infinity, new to Combined Army, not really sure, the Combined Army is essentially the evolved intelligence, this alien sort of being that has assimilated some of the non-human races within the Infinity universe, most notably the barbaric and warlike Morats, whose facial appearances look a bit like maybe monkeys or apes, and then of course the Shazvasti, who are themed and styled a little bit after the Predator movies, if you're familiar with them. Of course you are. And there are some other races out there, but it's those two mainly that form the Combined Army. If you play Combined, you are the bad guys. You are playing as the faction that's most commonly considered the villainous one. They're there to assimilate and conquer. And everybody else is playing with these feeble human beings in their army lists. You have these wonderfully nasty, vicious, high-tech aliens, and that's an amazing thing about them. In gameplay terms, in terms of the tabletop, you have some quite cheap units and some very expensive high-tech units, so you're really embracing the idea of having a lot of smaller peripheral cheerleader type units to act as fuel for your big, nasty, powerful stuff, which is there to outclass your opponent's stuff. And I've mentioned high-tech a few times. They have access to just about everything across the board. I mean, Combined Army can access amazing hacking. It can access really powerful shooting. It can access tough armored units. It can access amazing close combat units. So it has a lot of flexibility there as well. So if you're thinking of playing them, strongly recommend. They're my favorite faction of all time, and probably will continue to be for some time. So let's start to get into it a bit more. By the way, some time ago I uploaded a Combined Army review strategy video within N3 for that edition. We're now in N4, so as soon as I upload this, I'm going to be going and deleting and taking down that older video, because I don't want somebody searching for Combined Army strategy review video and getting the old one. This is the more current and up-to-date one. It's also a really good point to make that some of the Infinity factions are getting these updates in a few months where they're getting a new sectorial, new units. That's less likely to happen to Combined Army, which is one of the reasons why I'm covering them first, because all of their subsections, subsectorials are out for N4. You've already got Nomads, Shazvasti, and Onyx playable, so we're not really expecting any major updates to Combined Army in the very near future. But as always, I mean, it's the 3rd of November 2020 in my country. If you're watching this video months and years down the track, there may have been things that kind of put this video a little bit out of date, but it should stay relevant for a fairly long time. I think even going back to that old Combined Army video I made for N3, there's still a lot of points in that video which are still very much true about the faction. So, if you're brand new to Infinity and you love the idea of Combined Army, you want to play as the aliens, you want to be the bad guys, you want to paint up those amazing looking Combined Army models, you might be looking for a little bit of a guide about what to buy and what not to buy. Everybody starts out as a new player, and one of the feelings that you're experiencing as a new player is always, oh, what if I buy something and it turns out to be a really crappy unit and my friends are just going to beat on me because I'm having to bring along this thing that's just garbage. A lot of Infinity players will tell you that the game is so well balanced that you can't really make a wrong decision. I'm your boy. I'm not here to tell you that. There are some mistakes that you can make, in my opinion. And look, let's have a quick talk about it. So I'm just going to jump over to the Infinity web store right now, and I will say a couple of things. I'll also show you this very brief notepad that I've got here. Let me make the font format ultra big. This is my ghetto little list here. So the first 3 things on this list are things that I would strongly recommend you add to your collection if you want to play Vanilla Combined Army, because the stuff that you will get in these packages are going to be applicable for just about any army list you build in just about any game you play for any mission that you play, pretty much. So the Ichadron, Batroids, and Imitron, I believe you buy a little blister pack and it comes with 1 of each. You need to buy 2 of those blister packs, so you have 2 Imitrons and 2 Ichadrons. Later in the video, I'll talk a bit more about why those things are essential. They're probably the least appealing looking models in the range, because they're quite old. You could, to be honest, you could even make some conversions or scratch builds of Imitrons, because they're just like this little cross sitting on a little pole, which is kind of weird. The remotes, though, much more contemporary and new in terms of sculpts go. The box is absolutely essential. You can magnetize the weapons, you can convert them, you can configure them, but the point is that you'll have 2 remotes. One of them can be a Q drone, or a T drone, or an M drone, or an R drone. They're the different loadout types of these remotes, but all of them are relevant in this edition. All of them are good and useful, and you need to have them at your disposal. Getting stuff like that's way more important than picking up a tag or some sort of super specialist character, right? Then there's the Wildfire box set. You can get the Shazvasti side of it. It's very common that somebody else will want the O12 half of it, so you can ask people in your community, hey, does anybody want to collect O12? Do you want to go halves with me? You can have the O12. I'll get the Shazvasti. We'll pay half of it. I think that is the best way to get a starter set. I'll talk about the other ones in a minute. But the Wildfire Shazvasti comes strongly recommended from me. They are amazing sculpts, and all of the models that you get in that set are going to come in handy. The smaller list that I've written down here just to the bottom, Avatar, Anathematic, Nokias, Raziat, Raiko, Betankiss. These are some good examples of units that are very strong in the meta for N4. And I want to point these ones out because if you look at these miniatures and you go onto the web store and you look them up and you think that they look good, what I'm trying to tell you here is that you can't really go wrong by getting them because they are pretty strong in the meta. I probably should add the Combined Army Support Pack with Dr. Worm to that list. In fact, why don't I just do that right now? Med Tech Obsidon is probably something you really ought to get right off the bat. Yeah, I mean, if you go through the collection, there are definitely some hits and some misses with what's going to be good, but Beyond Wildfire I would go with, and if you like the look of any of these sculpts here, that's what you can buy to add flavor to your army if you're not sure. If you're approaching this from a standpoint of, I just want to paint the models, I want my army to look cool, I want to be happy with the sculpts I've purchased, then you don't even really need to be watching a video like this initially. You could just be getting straight into it, and to be honest, a painting video would be more useful at this stage. Still, I'm glad you're with me to have a little look. Now, some of you guys might be aware of this Combined Army Starter Pack, which might seem like the logical choice if you're going to play Vanilla Combined, because it appears at face value to be like the entry, starter point to the faction. I want to quickly say that the 3 Unidrons, that's this guy at the top left, bottom left, and top right, these guys here, they are useful if you're going to play Onyx, the sectorial, but if you aren't, I really wouldn't recommend taking the Unidrons by themselves in Vanilla Combined Army because they're not very strong, and the job that they're supposed to be doing, providing cheap orders to your army, are done much better by your Imitrons and your Ichadrons, your R-Drone, your Datratzi Witch Soldier. Fractar is pretty strong, but he's just one model in the box. This guy, as I'll discuss later in the video, is probably something useful to proxy as an Umbra Samaritan, or even more likely to proxy as Nokias, the special character. He actually is meant to represent an Umbra Legate, which I don't think is the best choice, but we'll get to that later. And then there's the Mark Rep Tracker, which I don't think is particularly strong. It's just okay. It's just kind of average. But the thing is, if you get the Wildfire set instead of this box, you're getting some models which are actually really, really essential. So if you make the comparison there, I mean, just looking at the, I wonder if it shows exactly what you've got. This is the Beyond Wildfire expansion. That's not the one you want, by the way, and we'll talk about that a bit later. It's the Wildfire set, mainly because you get a Shrouded, you get a Caliban, and you get some Nox Troopers, which can represent Seed Soldiers. The basic Nox Troopers aren't really going to be of much use to you unless you play the Shazvasti Sectorial, but the Seed Soldier is, basically represented by a Nox Trooper anyway, so, why wouldn't you? Alright, so that's just a little bit of basic guidance as to what you might want to buy if you are starting out with vanilla Combined Army. Alright, shall we just dive into it? Shall we just go top to bottom and talk about all these profiles and unit loadouts and just do a hot or not, basically? I think we should. Again, I want to just strongly point out that a lot of the unit choices you'll see available to you in Vanilla Combined are best used in the sectorial setting. Even though you have the option to include them in a vanilla army, vanilla kind army list, some of them really only shine and really are only worth it if you are taking them in the sectorial. And the very first unit we'll talk about that is about here is a good example of that. So you got the Morat Vanguard Infantry, which are the basic line infantry troopers for the Morats, and they are a bit overcosted. They might be worth it if you're playing the sectorial because you can form them into a fire team. But in Vanilla Combined, they really don't help you because the job that they're going to fulfill most likely is as a cheerleader, just a cheap way to add extra orders to your army. But the thing is, the Ichadrons and the R-Drones defend your deployment zone better with their flash pulses, flamethrowers, and stuff like that, and are way cheaper. There is one exception, though, and that is the Morat Vanguard Lieutenant. That is one model that I would consider sometimes taking in a vanilla Combined Army list, because it's basically the cheapest way, if you ignore the one SWC that is, it's basically the cheapest way to get a Lieutenant into your list if you decide that you're not going to be running Avatar, Anathematic, Haunted, the big aspects, the big representatives of the EI, in your army list. So that is a possibility. So do come back and look for this guy if you are wanting a super cheap lieutenant. He also doesn't go into Lost Lieutenant if he gets isolated, which is a small perk if you're the lieutenant. In N3, the last edition, I would sometimes take the Morat Hacker, but that was back when the Morat Hacker was there to give out assisted fire and control jump and do the kinds of things that the E-Drone is now going to be doing for you. So all in all, these guys with their machine guns and sniper rifles and stuff, and your paramedic, again, there are going to be other things in your combined army list which are going to do their job better. You don't really want to invest in a model that only has Blitzskull 11 and no other mods, no extra armor to be carrying your heavy weapons. Give the heavy weapons to the bigger, nastier aliens that can use them more effectively. So I will be skipping over many of the options in the army list builder over here that are like this, that are designed for a specific sectorial. So we now move on to the Fraktar drop unit, which is not really an example of that. This is a unit that legitimately could be a good choice for your combined army list. The one thing that really is the main selling point for this model is the fact that if you do a wound to it, it's only got one wound here, but if you wound it, rather than going unconscious, it will transmute down to the survival form. So it can take a hit and fail the armor save and keep going. And that's a huge deal if you're going to be using the parachuter's ability to come on their table edge or just drop them in the middle of enemy lines, and the enemy has a chain rifle waiting. I mean, they've deployed defenses through their entire deployment zone. There's no way in, so you decide to drop in front of somebody, take a hit, and then attack them and beat them in a face-to-face roll. That's something the Fraktar can do, which the other drop troopers in this sectorial, in this army, can't do. So we're going to be talking about the Razyat and the Taryot and the Cadmus, Kodali. These other options don't have that option. So it's about survivability. It's about the ability to come in and tank face. The thing is, though, if you really are planning on investing in a drop trooper, the Razyat, in my opinion, outclasses the Fraktar, because the Razyat rolls a bunch of other abilities into one beautiful package where you're able to deploy at the back of the enemy's deployment zone or within it on the side. That's something the Fractar can't do. The Razyat also comes with an Eclipse Grenade, which is extremely useful, and the Razyat's an absolute beast in close combat. So once you factor those in, I tend to overlook the Fractar in favor of the Razyat, but it doesn't mean this guy is trash tier. He's still useful. You can drop him in with a boarding shotgun, he tanks a hit, then you spin an order on him, and he starts actually causing a lot of problems for your opponent. So if you happen to like the model, if you happen to have him in your collection, do try him out. He's not a bad unit by any means. It's just that the Razyat is the shining star of this faction in the current edition, and we'll get to him pretty soon. The Umbra Legates. So, these guys were very maligned and not very useful and kind of downtrodden in the previous edition. They have been buffed, and a lot of people are sort of celebrating the fact that they've got some bonuses now. But I'm sorry, guys. You probably suspected I would do this, but I'm going to come and bust up your party and say that this guy's still, he's still not really worth it, in my opinion. And it's sad, but anytime I look at this guy and think, would I take him? The answer is always, no, I'd rather have Nokias. And a lot of the troop profiles we're going to be talking about today are going to be directly compared to this guy down here, Nokias, who comes with a range of amazing abilities, and they all just bunch into one amazing unit. But coming back to the Legate has forward deployment, Nokias doesn't, and he can have a Spitfire, Nokias can't. The K1 combi rifle being really nice as well. My problem with him is that he's apparently supposed to be your unit which is doing the running and gunning in the midfield, and sadly, BS12, a little bit of minimalism, he's still going to have a really tough time up against the inevitable heavy infantry models and link teams, and the medium infantry models and link teams, like the Bolt Sniper and the Kamau Sniper. For him to get into close combat, he's still sort of got to walk over there. He doesn't have the Cyber Mask ability that Nokias does, so if you're just using him for that, not as good. Bear in mind that Nokias has 2 dice when he goes in for the kill in close combat. The Legate only has 1, so the likelihood of you gaining so many wounds from Prothion that you're counteracting all of the hits you're taking as you get into close combat is much lower. So if you're going for that gambit, Nokias is definitely the better option in my opinion. Does come with a hacking device plus option, but again, if you're trying to go across the table and shoot with him, just getting into that range with a boarding shotgun with your hacker, I just don't see it happening. He's going to be a bit more predictable, people are going to avoid him, and he's going to actually have to win some face-to-face rolls before he gets into that optimal range span. So I would warn people against falling in love with this guy. Sure, you might have the occasional game where he does well, but for his points bracket and for the kind of job that he's going to purportedly be doing, it's really a much better choice to go with Nokias. Trust me on this one, guys. Nokias just really is that much better. We come down to Nokias, who we'll get to eventually. He's just got 1 boring breaker combi rifle, but the sheer weight of other abilities that he's able to bring and his stat line will mean that essentially you're just much better off with the big Norkster. So sorry about that, guys. I don't really want to say too much more about the profile. It is just unfortunately not quite enough. He doesn't do anything outside of what we've already discussed for him to really interest me. He doesn't really have any sort of niche ability that I like enough to recommend him. The MedTech opposite on Mechanoids, affectionately known as many Combined Army players call him as Dr. Worm. He's always been a staple of Combined Army, still a really, really useful piece because he can revive unconscious models that had wounds, but he can also repair mech units with structure points. And he's very fast. He's a little bit big with the Silhouette 3, but he can go prone. And he does come with a combi rifle. They did strip away his SMG profile from last edition. They've just streamlined him a bit. But if you don't already have a doctor or paramedic and engineer on your list, you should take him. There are a lot of ways to get your units immobilized or isolated in this new edition. He is the thing that's able to revive that and repair that. He's especially essential if you're running units which have wounds and stand a good chance of being revived that don't have regenerate, for example. If we think about Shishkin, she's a 2-wound model. The Sogarat as well. I don't know if the Sogarat has regeneration. I get the feeling they may have given it to him. Oh, he doesn't actually have regeneration. He's just got 2 wounds plus NWI. So, yeah, if he drops into NWI, you could actually bring him back a wound with your medtech. So that's sort of where this guy really shines. He's also going to be a great specialist for moving out and pressing buttons quickly with his slippery, slimy 6'4" movement. In my own personal lists, I have started to take him less, but only because the Caliban engineer down here can do his job if the only thing you really care about is reviving models with structure points. And I seem to be taking way more, structure-heavy lists in my combined army lineups these days, which is why, if I don't feel a need to revive a model with wounds, and I'm only really needing to revive models that have taken hits to their structure points value, taking the Caliban engineer can be better, because the Caliban, for just 6 more points, is also a midfielder. He's also in camo state. He's also amazing at close combat, with the CC and Protheon and martial arts now stacking, and the decharges being there as well. So what you can do is you can take a Caliban engineer and have a couple of slave drones back towards your deployment zone, and they can activate at the same time the Caliban does. He can use those little tool slave drone guys to repair your guys in your deployment zone, and still be a threat out in the midfield. So unless you want to go down that path, the medtech is the way to go. Wouldn't recommend the Kergat so much. Kergat, he's not really doing a lot of fighting unless he's going to be in a Morat link team. The boarding shotgun, sure, he's just an engineer starting in deployment zone and not a doctor as well. So the medtech's better than the Kergat if the Kergat is only being used as a engineer and not as a fighter, if you know what I mean. Next up, we have Shazvasti Siege Soldiers. The thing that I like about these guys is that they fulfill a really nice little points bracket here, where if you look at everything else in the faction, which costs between 15 and 20 points, this guy is one of the better options for that points range. So when I'm building an army list and I've put all my models in there and there's just one slot left to fill in, but I've only got 17 points left, that's where I would usually add this guy, the Seed Soldier Fort Observer. The thing I like about this is that he's cheap enough to be an ordinary cheerleader, where if you just don't do anything for the entire game, you've spent 17 points, you've got an order per turn, and he's kind of given you some value. If you need to defend and you're worried about an enemy trooper coming past, well, you can just let rip with a chest mine, so it basically just goes off while he's in seed embryo state, and sometimes that will actually get the value because they won't have suspected him to have been a Seed Soldier. Their model will lose a wound. And then occasionally you will actually hatch out of your seed, go and press a button, and get supreme value out that way. And most line infantry troopers don't come with a Panzerfaust. That could be quite nasty in the late game, where he hatches, moves out, maybe secures a mission objective, and he's just standing camping that objective. And your opponent doesn't really have much left. They're going for that final turn push. They're up against your Panzerfaust now, which is much better at long range than the combi rifle. So for 17 points, it's really a decent deal. I don't really tend to build my lists around these guys. These are kind of like filler when I don't quite have the points for something more expensive and I don't want to downgrade something else on my list. So that's when the Seed Soldier Fort Observer, or to be honest, any of these other profiles really come in handy. I mean, I'd consider any of them. The grenade launcher is a bit tough because with the changes to spec fire, he'd be Ballistic skill 11 if it's in the, well, there's only a 0 range band for it now, so at -6 he's hitting on a 5. So for one SWC, it's kind of a bit of a hard sell for me. But these other choices, definitely fine. So definitely don't see anything wrong with taking these guys. Oh, and by the way, for deployment plus 8 inches, that's not something you get with your basic Nox Trooper line infantry. By the way, if I didn't say so already, the Nox Troopers that you get with your Wildfire starter set, they are really excellent models to use as Seed Soldiers. Because you don't really want to take the basic Nox Troopers in your vanilla combined army list. They don't do the cheerleader job as well. For the same points, you get like a Datratsu Witch Soldier, which is way better. Next, Shazvasti Cadmus. These guys were notorious in N3 for the decoys being really interesting when you do a combat jump with them. It works a little bit differently now, so I'm not too sure if they're the king of landing and sticking and being great at attacking in the midfield there. But still, they are reasonably priced. I don't mind them. They come with this Morphoscan ability, which is kind of hard to pull off. I don't really see that happening in many games. Even if you get close enough to like Achilles or Shishkin to take their stats, that's not going to come up that often, and most of the time it's just going to be cheaper stuff that's not worth the risk of spending in order to gain their abilities. So it's a bit of a gimmicky one, but what he's really more about is landing right next to their repeater network with the Killer Hacker. Unfortunately, Killer Hacker devices don't ignore firewalls anymore, so that makes it a bit harder. The Red Fury is a little bit of a tougher sell too, because he's Ballistic Skill 11, so once he hatches out, he's going to be doing some shooting, but he might not even beat your average flash pulse bot in the distance. Probably the boarding shotgun profile is the one that that looks the most appealing to me, although just on closer inspection, this one has an assault pistol as well. So if you are going to be relying on your BS11, that might do some damage. And remember, when you're dropping in, you've got the decoy ability. That really helps to actually clear out some of the things that would be detonated by a decoy, like mines and crazy koalas, mad traps, which, as far as I'm concerned, I'm pretty sure they still are detonated in 4. Just tell me if I'm wrong about that. Might not be 100%. But these guys can be very, very useful. Again, we're going to be talking about the Razyat soon. The Razyat is the gold standard for drop troopers in my mind. If I'm going to be investing in that kind of thing, that's where I'd be going. You can also get the Taryot drop suit, who actually causes an explosion when he lands, which may arguably be a better investment than this guy. Having said that, you know, those guys may need the support of the E-drone's controlled jump, whereas this guy is the kind of guy that you can sort of bring along the side of the table, move out with the decoys, detonate some nasty deployable equipment, and really make a nuisance of yourself. So he's definitely above average, in my view. Shazvasti Hydux. This is a rare MSV2 unit. It has Sapper, which is its main draw. It just comes with the AP Marksman profile loadout and not much else. Reasonably priced at 22 points. I'm not a fan of this guy. I wasn't an N3 and I'm not an N4. And the reason why is the ability for him to perform his job compared to other units in this faction, and that's really what it comes down to, and that's how I evaluate all of these unit choices. Is this guy an attack piece? Do you deploy him in your deployment zone, pick him up, and start walking around the table, shooting things with your AP Marksman Rifle, Ballistic Skill 12? I don't think so. I don't think that he's the kind of unit you want to go after a tag with. I don't think he's the kind of unit you want to go after a heavy infantry model in a link team with. I don't think he's the kind of unit you want to go after a medium, or just a single sniper, or like a medium infantry sniper in a link team. He's just 3 bursts, he's just Ballistic Skill 12. He doesn't really have any good mods when he's walking around the table. As an ARO piece, is he going to shut down an enemy pushing across the table if they have an HMG? Let's just say it's your basic, 25-point TR bot, Ballistic Skill 11, it doesn't even have assisted fire. Who would you rather be? The Haiduk shooting back with the one shot from the AP Marksman Rifle? Or would you rather be the TR bot with Burst 4 HMG? If you're not convinced by that argument, what if they have a Shang-Chi AP HMG in a 5-man link team blasting you? Do you want to be the Haiduk then? Probably not. There are a lot of these units in the game now, so all of the tags, all the heavy infantry HMGs and link teams, they're just going to clean this guy out. He needs something like Marcus State, or he needs a better gun or better stats. Even though he's kind of cheap at 22 points, he's, in my mind, kind of wasteful, because he's just going to get shot as soon as he pokes his head above the parapet. So my recommendation is not to take him. The Noctur, on the other hand, is the opposite of all of that. So you guys know that I've been taking Nocturs for years. They are one of my favorite units ever. My thumbnail avatar in Discord is actually this icon here, the Noctur, and it's primarily about the missile launcher profile. Although I do sometimes run the Spitfire, I do occasionally run him as the lieutenant, very rarely, and I would never run him as the basic combi rifle or the hacker. So there are a lot of obvious things about this unit. You only have to reveal him as an ARO piece from hidden deployment when it's the right time. So your opponent doesn't have the luxury of just shooting at him with their HMG or MSV2 or something until you've had your say and you've had the chance to spring him to hit an enemy model. So that's one of the most important things about him, having hidden deployment and a strong ARO with the missile launcher. Second thing about him is that he poses an extreme threat to big link teams, and link teams are very common in this game. If your opponent uproots their link team and they all come out of cover and they're moving across the street, and your Noctur shoots one of them, anybody that touched the point where the template was during their movement will potentially be hit by a missile launcher and have to take 3 armor saves. So, as you can imagine, that can be devastating. This guy is one of the reasons why the Tactical Awareness Pain Train and Invincible Army isn't even that good. We're talking about a faction that can take a heavy infantry link team with 14 orders that can just race around the road killing you. They're perpetually worried about the Noctur coming out and hitting them. Remember that either have to dodge, or if they shoot back, the other models that aren't shooting take the hit from the template. It's extremely scary. On top of that, he still keeps his Mimetism -6 and Dogged, so unless they have MSV2, they might not even beat him with an HMG, they might just whiff their shots. If they don't have Shock, they might not kill him, meaning that he's actually still watching the table for the remainder of that turn, which is horrific. And enemy models that are dropping near to him with Impersonation or with Parachutist, that kind of thing, if he springs out of hidden deployment and it's the combined army player's turn, he can start ripping them into them with an assault pistol, surprisingly enough. I remember one game I played where I picked up my Noctur and I walked all the way from my deployment zone to the other guy's deployment zone, shot somebody with an assault pistol, and they're set up on the side of their deployment zone watching their whole flank with a missile launcher. This guy is nuts, so he's just top tier. The Spitfire I also like, not as much anymore because we're in an edition now where armor piercing is a bit more relevant, but I still kind of like him as an attack piece. He still has the ability to move over the side of the board and use his Mimetism -6 as his main strength, and if he gets unlucky, if he gets hit by some sort of chain rifle or something along the way, that Dogged can allow him to continue inflicting damage until the end of the turn. So give the Spitfire an occasional go, but most of the time if you're going to take one of these guys, it's the missile launcher. Morats can't take this unit. Onyx can take 2 of them. Shazvasti can take 3 of them. There was a tournament I played in where I did take 3 of them. It was a blast, literally and metaphorically. So do bear that in mind about their availability. Alright, on to the Kergat. Don't want to spend too much time on this guy because he is a choice for the Morat sectorial. He's best when you're bringing him along in a link team because then he doesn't have to have many orders spent on him. Other troops can do what they do best and bring him along for the ride. Then he can press buttons or, get you to safety if you've been immobilized or isolated. Very, very useful. Although isolated is not going to happen very much in your Morat sectorial. Very interesting profile now is the portable autocannon, which finally is a model that can go on a link team, and the portable autocannon is like, explosive rounds, so, we'll get to that if we talk about the Morats as a sectorial, but that is the profile to keep your eye on if you like this guy. I just don't feel like he really has the burst potential in vanilla combined. Give him a go if you really like him, but I wouldn't recommend him. You want to take the Caliban engineer or the Medtech Obsidon for your engineering business. Moving on to Ada Swanson, she wasn't particularly good in N3. I don't think that she really brings enough in N4, sorry to say it. She has some very good looking abilities, good in close combat, booty, kind of handy, for deployment, always good, mimetism, that's fine, stealth, blah, 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 blah. +1 on her submachine gun, viral mine, so she's got this big suite of tools. But what is her job? Her job is undoubtedly to attack, to kind of disrupt them, to go out in the midfield, just pick up a few kills. I feel like the problem is not her profile, the problem is not her equipment and her abilities. The problem is that if you're going to be spending the orders on somebody to do that, it may as well be Nokias or a Caliban or something like that. Ada Swanson is just not going to do enough damage, not enough game swinging, not enough impact on your position to justify the orders that you're spending on her. The abilities and everything do justify the points cost. I think that 23 points is, you know, a very reasonable amount to pay for her. But I don't want to commit my entire turn sending her on a run around the other side of the table. Again, she's not great at dodging, so she's not great at avoiding a flash pulse, she's not great at avoiding mines or chain rifles or people coming out of hidden deployment, whereas a guy like Nokias has a better shot at that. He's got shock immune, NWI, way better ability to dodge, that kind of thing. So her performance in the roles that she's meant to do, I don't really trust her for that. But by no means is she terrible. You know, on the face of it, like in a vacuum, she's good. But yeah, she's not that great in terms of what you'd need her to do. Imitron, an absolute staple essential in Combined Army for a long time, just got better because somehow this is a light infantry model now. It's not a deployable equipment, so that means that it goes unconscious. It can be revived by your medtech. If it fails a guts check, apparently it could go prone or move 2 inches. We don't see why it can't do that. Technically, it could declare an alert, so if somebody moves within line of sight of it, rather than just sitting there and getting shot, you can at least do something useful now and declare an alert and have other models in your army change their facing, as far as I can tell here. And most importantly, when you combat jump it, if it fails the roll, it doesn't just immediately scatter and potentially go off the board or something like that. So it's always going to be deployed somewhere on the table initially. So your opponent will always have to spend an order killing it. And a lot of games that I'm playing, the Imitrons, just to survive until the end of the game, they give me 3 orders for just 4 points. They're an absolute steal. So unless you have a strong reason not to take them, they should be in every list. The only time I wouldn't run one is if I'm taking a 10 order list and I just don't have enough slots to use. But even in a 10 order list, I'm usually taking one Imitron. Libertos, Freedom Fighters. So, these guys were undercosted in N3, probably the most overpowered unit in N3 because they were too efficient for their points cost. They have come down in points cost, which is crazy. But before we freak out about too much, they don't have a DEP anymore. They don't have mimetism. Their camouflage marker doesn't have mimetism. And the context, the meta has changed a little bit. Does that mean that they are balanced now? No, it doesn't. You still want to take these guys if you can afford to have an irregular order in your list. If you don't mind spending the command token to convert them, you should always be taking this guy if you have spare SWCs as well, because you know at 8 points he's an absolute steal. Arguably, you might leave him at home if you need SWCs for more important things. But generally the crucial stuff about this guy has stayed the same. He's got dodge +6, so when you're dodging, dodge +1 inch as well. When you're dodging, you can move, even if you're out of line of sight of them in their turn. So if somebody's moving to within zone of control of your Libertos, they don't have stealth, you can now start dodging a Liberto into more annoying spots, and you can try and get into close combat. He's actually better at doing his job than he used to be, which is why he really should be in a lot of your Combined Army lists. He's not an auto-include, even though he wasn't in 3, but I'm still kind of disappointed with the way this guy is costed. It should be something like 0.5 SWC for the mine, but he should cost more like 14 to 16 points realistically. I mean, I'd still be taking him a lot of the time if he was costed that way, because his ability to slow them down and disrupt in the midfield, potentially cause a wound to enemy troops that cost way more than he does, is just huge. You guys, if you're new, you might not understand how important it is in Infinity if you can put a spanner in the works of your opponent's game plan, force them to spend a couple of extra orders they weren't expecting to spend in the midfield because your Libertos got in the way, and prevent them from having that extra push where they came around a corner and put out a couple more volleys of Spitfire shots into your back line. The Liberto being able to do that is just so important. Or if they're trying to just move it into base contact with an objective at the end and you're just engaging them and dodging straight towards them and getting in their way, it can be game winning. So don't overlook this guy. He's still absolutely broken. The Caliban, one of my favorite units of all time. This guy has become more powerful in the midfield because he can stack his martial arts with Prothion. So what happens here is that he gets +3 to hit, goes up to a CC 26. His enemy is -3, plus another -3 if he used surprise attack. And then you're using Prothion, which will stack with the D-charges. So let's say he's attacking, I don't know, he's coming and attacking a tag that has CC 18. The tag goes down to CC 15 because of the martial arts, then down to CC 12 because of the surprise attack. So let's say we crept up on him, so he's a CC 12. Maybe the tag is able to fire a flamethrower at us, but maybe we outmaneuver him and got in the back arc. CC 12 for the tag hitting back's not great. We are CC 26 in that trade-off, so we get +6 to our roll. So if you roll like an 8, that means that you rolled a 14. So for you to lose that close combat, you know, you really have to lose it by a massive margin. So let's say they roll a 9 and we roll a 2. That means that we've got an 8, they've got a 9, that they barely win. Let's say that you do win, they must take 3 saves with, you know, their armor halved because you're attacking with a D charge. And if they're a model that has a wounds value, every failed armor save is going to give you additional wounds. So let's say you're attacking just some sort of midfield like Foxtrot Forward Observer, and you get a crit. That means they take 3 saves plus an additional save in the D charge. So that's 4 armor saves. They are likely to fail at least 2. If they fail 2, they're completely removed from the board. Your Caliban goes from 1 wound up to 3 wounds. He is now a tag killer. He can kill other close combat specialists. He shreds any sort of basic infantry. He gains wounds, makes it harder for him to be dealt with. He does not have shock immunity, but remember, he has to be reduced to some kind of unconscious state for the shock to kick in. So if he goes up to 3 wounds and then back down to 1 wounds from a shock weapon, he doesn't get removed from the board. Bear that in mind. Then having a look at his equipment, SMG, great for the midfield. Pulsar, amazing. Most camo state units don't have a direct template weapon. He does. He's got, you know, some other loadout choices. He can be a chain of command, which is the optimal profile when you're running something like a Nokias Lieutenant, or something that doesn't have the moniker, or if you're running Shishkin, for example, as Lieutenant, Caliban chain of command is brilliant. I take the Engineer most often for the reasons I mentioned earlier. The Forward Observer, if you don't already have one, is fine. Nothing wrong with him. He comes with a flash pulse. This profile down here, a lot of people don't like it. In some lists, I actually really like it because he can be running and gunning from a position where he's already deploying 20 inches up the board, which is something you can't say about a lot of enemy models. MSV1 ignores smoke now, so you can shoot through it. Doesn't ignore the full penalty of shooting back through it, but you know, at least you see things. So with BS-12 and Surprise Attack, MSV1, a Spitfire, the position of forward deployment, he's actually really, really dangerous. And if there are some little things in his way, again, you know, you've got an Ermandina around the corner, you've got a Varangian Guard around the corner that's threatening you with that chain rifle. You move around a mark estate, eat them up with the D-charge and the Prothion. You go up to 3 wounds, then you start running and gunning with basically a model that can take as many hits as a tag can, if we're talking about just the wounds value. So that profile there is pretty insane. Again, you guys are probably upset. I know that some of you guys are really salty that I said that the Legate Spitfire, not very good. 42 points, 1.5 SWCs. We'll compare that to the Caliban. So the Caliban is better than the Umbra in close combat. I'm sorry, it's just true. I mean, you have surprise attack, you have the D charges, you've got Prothion. He is better in close combat. The Spitfire, same ballistic skill. They both have mimetism -3. They're deploying up the midfield. I mean, Mark Estate is huge. The Legate doesn't have that. So everybody who's just really crying tears of salt that the Legate has been downtrodden yet again, I mean, you're playing a faction where you can take the Caliban Multispectral Visor Spitfire, so I would recommend grabbing this guy instead. He's really good if you like that kind of role. On now to Shishkin, who at the end of N3 was just one of the most overpowered things in the game because of Fatality Level 2. That got fixed. It's now just +2 damage rather than critting on a 1 or the desired result. So this makes me think a bit more of the Shishkin at the start of N3, where she didn't have Fatality at all. I took her back then. I obviously took her when she was overpowered. Would I still run her in N4? Sometimes. I would definitely play her more often in Shazvasti sectorial than in Combined Army. It's just that Nokias is just so good right now. It's hard to really go for her. But look, no, don't get me wrong, she is good. The profile you want to go for is the Lieutenant Red Fury. So you can spend a few more orders, well, an extra order on her with the Lieutenant order. I'd pair her up with the Caliban Chain of Command, because if she does go down, very possible for that to happen, you've got the Chain of Command option, which by itself is a very, very good profile as is. Nanoscreen still handy. One thing that's a bit different about her is that the Martial Arts level 4, that basically gives her +3 and -3 to the opponent, so she's better in close combat than she was in N3, and the Protheon now stacks with your double action close combat weapon, so she's very, very strong. The only thing is that a lot of models in the game got a bit cheaper if they were already quite expensive, whereas she's still up there at 54 points, so she is quite expensive. Oh, and by the way, you can also stack the Protheon with the D charges, so let's just point that out with Protheon. So she is very, very strong. I mean, if I wasn't so in love with models like Nokias and Kodali and the Anathematic, I'd be running Shishkin a lot more. I do mean to try her out in some games, but I think that she's the kind of model that I'll run in Shazvasti, because Shazvasti brings some other useful things along, and they don't have access to those aforementioned models. So that's where I think she really shines. But look, don't get me wrong, Bliss skill 15, amazing. The Red Fury, although it's only damage 13, does go up to damage 15 with the BS attack bonus. We're kind of in a meta where we want to be able to crack armor, and I kind of like that about Nokias with his monofilament sword. Whereas Shishkin takes a bit longer when she's shooting or attacking in close combat with it. MA4 does mean that she's Fizz 18 with the double action close combat weapon, and the D-charges is half armor, so killing something in close combat, still pretty good at it. Nanoscreen, something that the other guys don't have. She's also pretty good at dodging with a +2 inches. The reactive dodge that's benefited from the +2 inches is also really strong. So I feel like I've made up my own mind. I've kind of sold myself on the idea of playing her a bit more. It's just that the other stuff has seemed so new and attractive recently. I haven't really had time to really get around to cracking her. One thing that is a little bit concerning to me is that the new crit mechanic, if she takes a rando kind of crit and fails both saves, that could be a bit problematic with only armor 1, but then of course she's got the nano screen. So should be armor 4 against just about any kind of shooting. I don't know if fire damage burns off the nano screen anymore. I don't think fire damage is even a thing. It's just continuous damage. So she should be a really solid choice still within vanilla combined army. So if you like the model, by all means grab her. She's not really going to disappoint or let you down. It's just a close call as to whether you invest the large points in her or go for something like the Anathematic, Avatar, Caronted, a bigger sort of list like that, right? No, she's really, really good. Tritak Anyat, this is a Morat. She is very strong, but again, I'm going to recommend that you overlook her, except if you're playing Morats. If you are playing the Morat sectorial, adding her to the link teams becomes very, very useful, because she brings the utility, the toolbox of the normal smoke grenades there and the EM grenades, chain cult, K1 cover up. It's a good toolbox of abilities to have. Specialist operative plus climbing plus gives her that mobility to get down off buildings and go press buttons. But if you're just playing her in normal old vanilla combined army, she isn't really equipped to go out and win lots of face-to-face rolls. And the smoke grenades, EM grenades, are very situational given her points value. You kind of want to just be using a Datrazi Witch Soldier for that kind of thing, and a midfield Shrouded or Caliban for your button pressing. So Tritak, really more of a sectorial choice. Okay, Umbra Samaritans, and again, the problem here is that Nokias at the moment is so well equipped and well supported with his abilities that you have to ask, why would you take a weaker version of him? So yes, you save a few points, but one thing I need you guys to understand about Infinity is that if you need a model to fulfill a specific role, and you're sort of banking on your game plan working by that model succeeding and doing well. You kind of need to splash out in that model and make sure it's totally equipped to do the job that it needs to do. So this guy is kind of built and costed to do some hand-to-hand. He needs to be into close combat doing some fighting. If you upgrade him to Nokias, you're rolling 2 dice, whereas the Samaritan is only rolling 1 dice in close combat, right? Otherwise, yeah, sure, you've got the equipment, you've got the tools to do it. In terms of shooting, sure, he's a similar kind of thing. The Samaritan can take the Spitfire, Nokias can't. But the thing is, the idea is to get into their side of the table, start scooping up some souls, start eating some corpses so that you're going up to wounds 3 as soon as absolutely possible. Nokias is just a bit better at doing that. He's got the slightly better close combat ability, and he's got the slightly better ability to carry himself across there because he has a killer hacking device for Cybermask, which is not something the Umbra Samaritan actually has. So if you note here, the hacking profile in particular is a normal hacker plus Trinity. What's being missed out there is Cybermask, because a normal hacking device doesn't have it. You're upgrading to the one program that the killer hacking device gives you, which can attack with Trinity, but you're not getting the Cybermask in there as well. Whereas if we come down to... the Plasma Carbine is nice, by the way, don't get me wrong. If we come over to Nokias, though, he's kind of got the opposite abilities, where he's got the killer hacking device in all its glory, so he can Trinity them, or he can Cybermask. But he can also do something against enemy tags, that total control there, pretty brutal. So I guess he misses out in Oblivion, but that's not really something you're going to be wanting to use primarily with your Umbra Samaritan. This is a profile that really thrives when it comes to dodging in and out of close combat and really just ripping up the enemy once you get there and sustaining him with their blood, effectively. So yeah, a Samaritan in a vacuum, pretty cool unit, really great looking, really awesome abilities. He's definitely benefited in N4. Dodging at +3 and the extra speed is just so huge in this edition, but you really want to upgrade him to this guy here. I'm serious, guys. Nokias just kind of tops out all of the stats there. Note that Nokias CC 25, whip 15. You come back here, CC 24, whip 14. Those are the important stats where you're doing the shooting and you're doing the hacking and the flash pulsing as well. You may as well have that extra point given how crucial it is to win on those rolls. So that's my view. Umbra Samaritan, great unit, but not good enough to be the head honcho. Nexus Operative. These guys are a Onyx unit. They are very good, but you want to be using them when you play the Onyx sectorial, because they allow you to join a link team that can benefit from them, and they make a good lieutenant option in Onyx. There is something to be said for having a slightly cheaper lieutenant and also a hacking lieutenant over here. If you're going to invest that many points in a lieutenant, I would recommend going for the mentor, because it at least gives you counterintelligence. The mentor, I believe, is willpower 14. Let's just check. Yes, he is. And the mentor actually is in Marcus state with a decoy, so he's much harder for the enemy to hit with a dropping Lu Shing or a Specfire from McMurrow or something like that. So I wouldn't really recommend the Nexus and Vanilla Combined Army anymore. It's not that he's bad, it's just your other choices for what this guy's supposed to do are better in the Vanilla Combined Army context, right? If you're playing Onyx, it's a different story. He becomes very useful. His linkability and the link teams matter. If you're looking at the NCO Nanoscreen Spitfire, again, you don't want to be running around with a guy who costs 28 points and giving him your Spitfire. He's just BS12. You need to be giving your Spitfires and your Red Furies and your machine guns to the big, bad, beefy models that have amazing ballistic skill and awesome stats and the armor and things like that. That's where those guns need to go. Krakow Renegade, one of my favorites of N3. I feel like he's much less interesting in N4 for a few reasons. He has metachemistry with a reroll, but the metachemistry chart has changed. In N3, it was very difficult to get a buff that wasn't going to be helping him out a lot. Now it is very possible to get just like plus BTS or something you don't really need. So that is a bit of a nerf to him. Berserk has been nerfed. It doesn't automatically give you +6 to your roll. He's just having to wing it with a CC23. He doesn't come with any martial arts or anything like that. So using him as a Berserk piece, he's not really guaranteed to get any additional speed now. That's much harder. And his loadouts, sure, they're pretty good. The loadout that I liked was the 15-point single SMG double action. You can't take that anymore. Arguably, the 14-point chain rifle one is good, but if I'm going to be spending 14 points somewhere in my list, it's going to be on the Natashkin Witch Soldier, who, unlike the Krakow, has been buffed. So when we come down to the Natashkin, well, he's got +1 burst in his chain rifle, he's got grenades, he's got smoke grenades, and he's better in close combat, and he picks up Berserk. So rather than going with the Krakow, I would now be investing in the Natashkin, who are a much better choice, personally. And the Red Fury, although I used to like that profile quite a lot, for me, it's going to be about other troopers doing that job these days. I'm fine with just the Q drone doing the shooting, or the Caliban, or the Anathematic, or whatever it may be. I don't particularly feel like I need this guy anymore, because the crit mechanic has changed. Cutting through something with Red Fury is a lot harder. It's just not really as desirable a profile as before. Bit and Kiss kind of dropped off for me in N3, but in N4 they're definitely back. Hacking has become such a big deal now because of the ARO nature of hacking being more useful. So in the meta, people are taking more compact lists. They're putting more hackable stuff in their lists, which means that hackers are now at a premium. And on top of that, if somebody walks past your repeater, you can start hitting them with a spotlight. Also, killer hacking is still really brutal. The profile here that I like the most is this one, the one where you are basically a hacker with the upgrade of the Trinity there. So you have all the basic hacking programs plus Trinity, but the special thing about this profile here is that Kiss is actually a repeater in that profile, whereas Kiss is not a repeater in the second profile. And the reason why that's important is because if you decide to move Bit across the battlefield with Kiss coming along, Kiss is moving ahead because of her speed, and if Kiss comes in range of an enemy hacker, they have to hack you back through your own repeater, so you're imposing a firewall on them. That's to be said, she does have a picture of her own, but with Blitzkill 11 she might get unlucky enough to miss her shots with the repeater, but with Kiss coming along with her, that becomes a bit more dangerous when you're trying to eliminate enemy hackers. Kiss, very cheap, and even though it's only BS10, they kind of have to respect the adhesive launcher. It's a great way of defending some of the lanes to your deployment zone, without really giving up a model that's going to be providing an order later. So you can just treat Kiss as kind of an expendable repeater / adhesive launcher. If you lose Kiss, it's not too big a deal. And then Bit, in the later game, just so strong with hacking with the BTS-6. She makes a great specialist. She does have Mine Layer, which means she can actually have one of her repeaters nearby to her in the deployment zone. I wouldn't really recommend that because you'd want to hold on to the repeaters later for actually shooting them. You'd actually deplete one of your repeaters if you use it with Mine Layer, so just be careful about that. And I just do like the fact that she's got the regular hacking programs plus Trinity. You can take the second profile if you want to have Cyber Mask, because it does it the other way around. Then you start with the killer hacking program, so you have Cyber Mask with Oblivion on top, but then that profile can't do any spotlights, and it doesn't have Kiss as a repeater. So make sure you know what you're doing if you take this profile. There are going to be some jobs with this profile does it a lot better, so I'm not saying it's bad by anything. I just personally prefer this profile a little bit more for the reasons that I mentioned. But Bit and Kiss very strong because of the changes to hacking and the fact that hacking is just really powerful and really relevant now. So then we have Kergat now. This guy, in my opinion, is an Onyx choice. He's the kind of model that you want in Onyx because you are firing a picture from your Link team, and he's benefiting from the Link team buffs on his plasma rifle shooting. He's not a bad or terrible choice in Vanilla Combined Army. It's just that one of his main jobs of moving around the battlefield and winning face-to-face rolls isn't going to be performed as well, and for a 27-point model, I'd kind of like him to be doing that a bit more. But if you feel like you can get 27 points of value out of him just doing hacking, from firing a picture with one burst and no bonus mods, the killer hacking device, the white noise without having to be a killer hacking plus. If you feel you can be doing all of that successfully for 27 points, by all means, go ahead. I mean, he's not terrible by all means. I just think that his main role is being in a Unitron link team in Onyx the Sectorial, and that's where his real strength is. Nox troops, not a lot to say. You don't get a lieutenant option here. These guys can form a link team in Shazvasti, but they're not cheap enough to be cheerleaders. They don't do the cheerleading job as well as Imitrons and Echidrons and R-drones, and they don't really have any tech that you want to add to your army in a vanilla combined army context that is worth it for their points and their stats. So we can basically ignore these guys. If you have them in your model collection, as I said before, use them to represent seed soldiers. They'd be better at that. The Mentor is a good Shazvasti choice for Lieutenant, but I sometimes consider taking him in Vanilla Combined because he is a safe Lieutenant. He gives you counterintelligence. He's expensive, but if you're going to be banking your game plan on going first and you want every order to count in your Alpha Strike going and attacking them, counterintelligence is a big deal. Your opponent might not even remember that you have counterintelligence because it's not going to be open information. You're in mark state. You don't have to tell your opponent in advance. They may spend the command token and then realize, oh, they've stripped you by 1 order, not 2. That can be a big deal. Willpower 14 Lieutenant, not bad. He can defend himself with his boarding shotgun. This is the profile, by the way, guys, that I would recommend. This one out of the 5. There's a case to be made for the other loadouts. It's just this one seems to be it. It allows him to be a lieutenant most cheaply. The boarding shotgun's better than the shock marksman rifle for defending yourself if you're about to get assassinated, or trading with your opponent with a template at least. And it really is just a combo of him having the counterintelligence and the whip 14 and being in a marker that really makes him worth it. The decoy also, sometimes if they're trying to hit you with a Lu Xing or a Tau Yacht trooper or something that does damage, they may pick the wrong marker, meaning that your lieutenant survives, which can be life or death really for your game plan. So good unit. Jaith Cutthroats, I haven't used them in N3. I don't know if I'll use them in N4. They are such an interesting unit. They come with so much. You've got, amazing close combat, MSV1, martial arts, mimetism -6, natural born warrior, which stacks with martial arts. Then you've got an amazing suite of weapons. My only problem with them is that they are armor 0, wounds 1. So this is an absolute glass cannon of a unit. You really want to be confident that you're going to get the damage done. I mean, if these guys just trip over themselves, they're going to die and just waste a whole chunk of points. Fizz 13 is great for dodging a mine, but again, at -3, you walk past a mine you didn't realize was there, 50-50 chance of failing it, then 50-50 chance of, well, actually much less than 50-50 failing the armor save. So that's a bit of a liability. They are unlikely to tank just a basic chain rifle. If they get swept by some sort of spec fire grenade or something, I mean, these guys are just so flimsy. They can form a link team in Shazvasti, and that's where I might consider taking them, but then you've got like 3 glass cannons all in one group. So for me personally, I don't love them unless you've got some sort of plan in mind for getting the value out of them. I mean, you need to be winning your face-to-face rolls, or at least getting into close combat with something really juicy. It's just that I can't see them being able to do that game after game after game after game. It feels like they're going to be a bit hit and miss, so be careful about taking too many Jaith Cutthroats in Vanilla Combined Army. Cube Jaeger is a mercenary, not really a Combined Army troop choice. He's not particularly bad. Paramedics did get a little bit better. It's nice that he's a specialist. He does take up an entire slot in your 15 model army, unfortunately. I don't love him. I mean, the monofilament CC weapon looks interesting, but, you're only C6 close combat 16, which isn't super reliable. He has got a couple of nice guns, but BS11, not particularly reliable. If your opponent has just defended their drop zones very well, it's going to be hard for him to bring in, come in there with an opening. And if he's not doing that, he's not really contributing much to your army in terms of orders. He is irregular after all. So he's not one of my more favorite models. I have heard some people getting a lot of mileage out of him, but I'm just not really seeing it. My problem with him is just a bit too situational in this faction. Victor Messer, again, a very interesting unit. I think if you're going to take this guy, it will often be in Shazvasti, where he can be in a link team, but even then, he is very expensive. Previous edition, he could put assisted fire on stuff. Now he's more of, you know, a combat hacker. I'm worried for him. I mean, if they can see him coming, I mean, they can avoid him because he's not going to be in Marcus State. He starts in deployment zone. He has to move out midfield to get some aggressive hacks off. If he's shooting things, surely you'd be rather using your Guilo, your Caliban Spitfire, or your Noctur Spitfire, or a Nokias, or you know, Shishkin, that kind of thing. So BS12 nanoscreen, I just don't know if he's going to win enough face-to-face rolls over a long period of time to justify going for him. If you're a huge fan of white noise and you seem to be getting all of these white noise zones off and just thrashing people who don't have an MSV in a link team, or something like that, something like that to counter you, if your white noise zones are working a lot and you prefer this guy over Kernow, then fine, go for it. I just don't think this guy is super well priced for what he needs to do in vanilla combined. Maybe he's a bit better than in Shazvasti. I wouldn't take him in Shazvasti, that's just my personal preference. But I just don't have much positive stuff to say about this guy. Sorry. He has been around for a while, we've studied him. I'm just not really seeing it, guys. Octavia Grimsdottir, I'm not really sure how to pronounce that, sorry if I butchered that. This is a brand new sort of limited edition model coming out with N4. I'm just going to be blunt with you guys and say that this model is unfortunately junk. It is trash tier. That's just my personal opinion. But let me back that up by just saying a few things in disfavor of her. If she's your ARO piece, okay, so she's BS12. Yes, she's BS attack +1 burst, but not in the reactive turn. She's still only going to be firing one shot with either her missile launcher or contender. So if she's just sitting there up in a sniper tower, you've got your 1 dice for BS12 up against, what might they have? They might have like an Omega Trooper with HMG Mimetism -6, you're screwed. They might just have a basic TR bot with, you know, 4 dice BS11. Well, they are highly favored to beat you. Thing is, though, they might have a tag with a shock, damage 16 HMG BS14. That'll just wreck this person. They might have something with surprise attack. She's got 6th Sense, that's great, but she's not going to avoid their mimetism. So as a reactive piece, she's very weak, and she still costs a fair amount. In the active turn, I mean, what are you hoping to be attacking? Some sort of flash bot? Yeah, you might be able to beat that, but you might not. Beating somebody that's in a link team, like a Kamau sniper or a Bolt sniper, well, you're really not favored to do that, because although you're 2 dice, they're 2 dice, but they're higher Blister skill, they subtract from your BS because of their mimetism, whatever they've got. It makes it really difficult. So what is her job? In what situations does she shine? And once you've figured out which situations she is good in, it's sort of like this very small, you know, diagram really, where there's a whole bunch of situations where she's really not that great in, and a smaller set of situations where she may be quite good. Dogged helps you out. But that's not what we're really looking for in a good ARO piece in Combined Army. Please take my advice if you're a new player. If you have the choice, instead of getting Octavia, get yourself a Noctur missile launcher, please. Trust me, it's a much better choice. Oh, we're on to Nokias, finally. Let me have a drink. We're past the 1 hour mark. Okay. So as you guys know already from my discussion so far, this guy's one of my favorites. Probably top 5 profile in Vanilla Combined Army. He is a bit fragile, but his potential is what really makes him stand out. So let's just go through it. 6'2 stats, very good, especially with super jump, because it means you can jump up 6 inches and shoot, or you can jump 3 inches up in the air and come back down and shoot. Very, very handy indeed. And the running and gunning with 6'2 is better than having 4'4. CC25 makes him the best combined army, sorry, the best close combat stat in the game. Tied, obviously, with, you know, Shinobu and Musashi, but CC25 is no joke. With Martial Arts Level 4, you're going up to CC28, which means that a 12 plus will crit on a D20, and if you roll a 1 on your D20, you've rolled a 9. So the possibilities are rolling somewhere in the vicinity of a 9 to a 12, or a crit. Those are the options. You're getting +1 dice in your active turns, so you have 2 opportunities to crit on a 12+, which means that Nokias' chances of critting are extremely high. When he does crit, he's forcing an additional save, which could be turned into a wound because of the EMCC weapon. Note that EMCC weapons have normal and EM ammunition combined, so you're actually forcing a normal armor save to suck out their innards with your blood drinking ability, and also the ability to immobilize them. So don't forget about that. He doesn't have to resort to using his pistol. He can go Fizz 12 with the martial arts level 4 +3 damage bonus, so he's damaging them on Fizz 15. So it's likely they'll fail their armor saves. Speaking of Fizz 12, he has +3 to his dodge, so he has a 75% chance of dodging, and he goes an extra 2 inches, which means that when he's reacting to you, if he's sitting in your deployment zone, in the enemy's deployment zone, and they're trying to finish him off, but he's dodging into close combat, suddenly he's exacerbating the problem even further. He may have 3 wounds because he sucked them all up. He is super dangerous there. Dodging on a 15 is really big, and the extra speed you get is really nasty. Then there's the willpower stat. That is insane for hacking, but he has a flash pulse, so if he's just trying to fend them off, like if he's sitting in their deployment zone in cover with armor 2 and 3 wounds, but he's flash pulsing them on willpower 15, they might not clear him out with their Spitfire or their HMG in their turn. That might not even happen. So Prothion, we talked about it, it stacks with the EMCC weapon, it doesn't stack with the Vorpal, but if you are in a situation where you've only got an order or 2 left and you really need to kill that tag or that lieutenant or whatever they may have, the Vorpal CC weapon is there. You can also put them into a lot of sweat mode by throwing it 8 inches. Fizz 12 is what you'll be using there for the throw. It can be thrown in ARO, it's pretty nasty. He has stealth, which is a really big deal because you don't want other people dodging out of your way when you're trying to get into close combat with them and cross the board to them. NCO is massive because rather than risking him as a lieutenant, what you can do is have somebody else as your lieutenant, maybe an avatar with an additional lieutenant ability, or the Suryat, who's lieutenant order +2. So Nokias is rushing towards them at 6.2 speed with an additional 2 orders from NCO, which makes it much more likely he'll get there, rip somebody up in close combat, go up to 4 wounds, and then make it into close combat with more people and just cause them an absolute nightmare. Super Jump's not actually as good as it used to be, but, you know, a lieutenant hiding on a rooftop prone is not exactly safe against Nokias unless it's a very, very tall building. So don't forget that you can do that. You may also have other opportunities to jump up and break rifle somebody and jump back down again. That will work as well. Previously, Umbra Samaritans had NWI but not shock. Now they do have shock, so you're never worried about a situation where you're going to drop down to NWI from a mine and die. So don't be afraid of charging at somebody and taking a couple of mine hits on the way, or even a crazy koala hit. If the target's juicy enough for you to actually gain a couple of wounds in the process, what will happen is you'll gain a couple of wounds from close combat inevitably, and you'll lose 1 or 2 from the mines and crazy koalas, and then you'll be in a position where you are still left standing, you can move on to kill something else, and all of their mines and stuff have been detonated. This is a character that requires some skill to use. You may fall flat on your face with him if you're a new player and you don't know where to move, if you don't know what orders to use, if you don't know what AROs to choose with him. But as you gain experience and you start to expand your spatial intelligence and your ability to read the play and sort of see where the plays are, this guy is brutal. So let's look at the loadouts. I'll start with the bottom one, the Lieutenant Hacker. So you get the total control +1 damage ability plus killer hacking, and you can go into an impersonation state to avoid AROs as you're rushing in to try and kill them and charge them. My reservation about this profile is that if he does get hit by an Oblivion, the chain of command isn't going to work because he won't have died. The chain of command won't kick in, and you'll be in loss of lieutenant. So be careful. But being able to go into Mark State really helps them to avoid those enemy hackers, and if they only have 1 or 2 hackers that are not in Mark State, you can just kill them with your Trinity in your active turn. You know, you've got willpower 15 and all of that, so that is brilliant. This guy here, probably a very good profile choice too, because he's not in danger of being hit by isolation, and you can take a backup chain of command Caliban somewhere else in the field. Then you can charge out with this guy, use the NCO. It's just that you can't do any hacking with him. This guy here, this is another great loadout, because it means that even if you do get hit by an Oblivion, you're still standing there, you can still dodge, you can still engage into close combat, you're still a huge threat, and you won't be in loss of Lieutenant. So for that reason, this is an amazing profile as well. And then of course there's this one, where you're not really vulnerable against any hacking at all if you go, except for Spotlight. So if you charge into their territory, even if he does get hit by Spotlight, they might not be able to hit him with a missile launcher guided missile, because he'll probably be quite close to other models which will be in the template range, causing the template to be null. You're not going to go into Lost Lieutenant because he's not the Lieutenant. But importantly, he can't be hit by enemy trinities. So if he's trying to beat something in close combat which is nearby to a repeater, you don't really want to be having to hack the enemies through their repeater and try and kill your target at the same time. So this is actually possibly the best profile, all things considered, if you are confident enough to get over there without using your Cybermask state. If you are really wanting to use Cybermask, and I can't blame you, then this profile may be the best one. But what I love about this is that all four of these loadouts are useful and viable and considerable for all of those regions I mentioned. So wow, what a beast. This guy is just such a good model for N4. N4 has made the game much about hacking. This guy excels at hacking. Dodging is massive in this game. This guy excels at dodging. Close combat is a huge deal in this edition. He is top 5 close combatant in the game, in my opinion. Prothion now stacking with everything. He's got Prothion up to the gills. This guy is just unbelievable. So let's leave it there. Nokias, strongly recommend. Agent Dukash, this is a bit more of a unique Shazvasti special character. I find him a bit weird. He isn't as expensive as Shishkin, but the thing is that Shishkin does a lot of the things that this guy would do. Shishkin's better in close combat. She's better at shooting by +2 ballistic skill. They have the same damage bonus. Shishkin's got better physical and willpower. Shishkin has 2 wounds, he's only got 1 wound. Shishkin's similarly good at dodging, maybe not exactly the same. His one benefit is that he has Specialist Operative, and she's not a specialist. This guy's got NWI but not shock immunity, whereas she's got 2 wounds. This guy's got a viral pistol, but she's got the D-charges and pulsar and all of that. She can take a multi-rifle, he can as well, but she can take the Red Fury, which is arguably better. For a run-and-gun type model, and she's got the nano screen, he's only got mimetism -3. So, I mean, would you want to spend an extra 10, 15 models on Shishkin? 15 points, I should say. My argument is definitely yes. Unless this guy's able to fulfill some sort of link team wish listing that you're trying to do in Shazvasti, I wouldn't recommend this guy in N4 in Combined Army. And note that we just talked about Nokias, right? So you could take the cheapest version of Nokias for 42 points and compare it to this guy. So an extra 3 points for Nokias. I think I'd rather have Nokias, just for all the reasons we talked about. Sargosh, another similarly priced, unique, interesting Shazvasti special character. This guy is kind of interesting because he does something a little bit more different to Nokias and Shishkin. He is interesting to me because he's a upgraded Jaith operative that is more resilient. So Shishkin and Nokias definitely don't have mimetism -6. That is a big deal if you're wanting to win face-to-face rolls through shooting. Shishkin and Nokias don't have MSV1, which now sees through smoke templates and obviously is an all-round good ability. But similarly to Shishkin and Nokias, this guy is very good in close combat. CC24 and MA3, that means that he does beat up on people pretty handily, and he's got Natural Born Warrior, which they don't have. Natural Born Warrior stacks with MA3 now. So if he comes into close combat with an enemy ninja, you drop the enemy ninja's CC from 23 down to 20, so they're hitting on a 20. You're going up to 26, so you're critting on a 14 plus with +6/2 dice on everything else. and you're negating the ninja's MA3. So he is pretty special in close combat in a way that Nokias and Shishkin aren't quite. And he's better at winning the face-to-face rolls than they are because of his shooting abilities. He is more resilient than the Jaith Cutthroats because he has immunity shock and... let me see, does he have NWI? Well, that's, I guess, his one weakness is that he's still only 1 wound, but he actually costs a massive 37 points. Still, I'd rather have immunity shock because you could revive him if you've got a doctor or paramedic around. It's tough, man. It's hard for me to consider this guy just because 37 points for a 1 wound model is a tall order. I think the never-ending horror story for a model like this is that you're walking past a random pistol or combi rifle shot. They roll a critical hit. You've got to take 2 armor saves, and he's only armor 1. You fail either one of those saves, he's unconscious. You fail both of them, which is a realistic possibility. He's removed from the board, never to be seen ever again, and your 37-point investment was for nothing. It's not as likely if you can isolate things and shoot them with your mimetism -6 and your BS12 and all of that. The model is insane, by the way. This guy looks cool, so for that reason alone, I want to paint him up and play him. But it's just a bit of a tough ask. If I'm ever going to take Sargosh, it's going to be in a link team in Shazvasti, where he gets an additional burst. Maybe with a couple of other Jaith Cutthroats or one of the wild cards, or maybe with Shishkin herself. If you take one cheap Jaith, Sargosh, and Shishkin, if that's a legitimate link team, then I'd probably go for it. In fact, I might even just take a quick look. I just want to know. So we're just going to take a detour from our thing here. Jaith Cutthroats, yep, you can have a Harris team. And then, by the way, in Shazvasti, they've got the Pit Patrol as well, which is pretty cool. Sargosh counts as a Jaith, that's fine, and I believe that Shishkin is a wild card. Not the boarding action one, but the regular Shishkin. Yeah, so any fire team. So that would be the way to go, actually. I would go with Sargosh with Shishkin, or some sort of combination of that. Mark Rep Trackers, the classic medium infantry, which comes in the starter set. So it's still possible to use this combo where you put down a smoke grenade with your Dacheratsi. It's basically down for free with your Impetuous Order. Then you bring your Mark Rep out of hiding and you fire at an enemy model that has, that is trying to ARO, and you impose a -6 to them, but not to you because you've got MSV2. Your Bliss skill 12 with an HMG. So that's sort of the thing this model does. Yes, the sniper rifle arguably is reasonable, but not strong enough in my opinion as an arrow piece. All of these other profiles are trash. It's the heavy machine gun, if you're ever going to take this guy, is the one you're going to be taking. Regeneration is better than the auto medkit that it used to have, so you basically don't have to spend an order. Just at the end of the turn, you've got a 55% chance of just regenerating it if it ended up with one wound. Sixth Sense means that you can't beat this guy with a white noise. It's going to be ignoring the penalty for shooting back through the template with the Sixth Sense ability. But still, for 33 points, Bliss's skill 12, we are in a bit of a meta now where if you're going to be investing in a big, powerful HMG, it probably should be on a tag, which gets the +1 damage and, more importantly, armor piercing or shock, whereas this guy doesn't really have either. With just 1 wound, no shock immunity, this model also goes down. If you're trying to beat the enemy TR bot, they get a random crit on you and you fail both saves, you can't even regen yourself. The Mark Rep suddenly feels like a bit of a bad investment. So over a long period of games, even if you're playing this guy very well every single game, there are going to be some real letdown games, which makes me cautious about playing them. Overall, though, in a vacuum on paper, the HMG profile seems fine. It's sort of like, 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 kind of profile. There are just a lot of other things I'm more attracted to. I'm not going to come out and say that he's bad. He's not a bad unit. He's definitely usable. Sometimes he does really shine. I mean, if the enemy shows up with their own Noctur or, OD, so Mimetism -6, sniper rifle or something, you're really glad that you have the Mark Rip around. It's just, it's a bit situational. That kind of thing's not going to be there every game, if you know what I mean. Rodok, I don't really want to talk about this guy much because he's there for Morats and to a lesser extent Onyx, being able to form link teams. In vanilla Combined Army, he's just a bit too expensive. He's too pricey to be a cheerleader, but he's just not well equipped enough and well supported enough to be a big attacking piece. Again, there are other models we've discussed earlier in this video which are good for moving and running and gunning with their big guns. This guy doesn't quite do that. He is there to be part of a link team. Armand Lemuet, he is better than he was in the previous edition. Some people took him in N3. The profile that has MSV1 I am drawn to because you can't just walk by this guy with a smoke grenade. He does sort of see through that. He's a bit more vulnerable to all of the white noise albedos and things out there, which are a bit more prevalent nowadays, so that's one thing that makes me worry about him. And he's a lot of points for a model that kind of doesn't stand up that well against just your basic heavy infantry model in a link team with an HMG. And then, of course, if he's up against things like a Marut, you know, that's going to kind of cripple him. The new Bolt Sniper with MSV1 and marksmanship, that kind of gives him a bit of a hard time. He's not bad, though. If you can afford him, if you don't like the ARO pieces in Combined Army, he's definitely pretty solid. He's so resilient with his ability to transmute, so he's like having a 2-wound model. I prefer to put my stock in the Noctur for missile launcher. This guy does a bunch of things the missile launcher does not. For 39 points, if you want to spend a little bit more on that, you could actually get something like a Cigarette Feuerbach or a Overdrawn Heavy Rocket Launcher. So do consider those other options before you splash out straight away on Armand. He's not bad, though. The Yaugat. This is, again, something we'll gloss over because this is a Morat unit. This is for the Morat sectorial. He is at his best when he's combining with other Morats and forming a link team where he gets burst bonuses and whatnot. I will just very briefly draw people's attention to the strange profile option here where it says multi-sniper rifle +1 burst. Like, where did that come from? So he's burst 3 even by himself. In the Yaugat link team, he's burst 4. So maybe, just maybe, you might want to take just this guy by himself in vanilla combined. But he's gonna suffer from the same problems that the Mark Rep did, right? So the Mark Rep HMG is 4 shots through smoke at BS12. This guy's 3 shots through smoke at BS12, but doing double damage because of the DA round. It's just that you're still having to be in a situational sort of position where you can't quite beat everybody, and he's not going to be great every game. You want to choose things for your lists which are going to be very powerful and very useful over lots and lots of games and be very reliable. And this guy, he is more likely to do that in the Morat sectorial, I must say. Finally, we are onto a Morat unit, which is actually amazing, even in vanilla Combined Army. This trooper has been buffed like you wouldn't believe. And remember, I put him in my little note card over here, Razyat. This is one of the models that, you know, you just can't go wrong with purchasing this miniature if you're trying to win games of Infinity. And there are a few reasons why. So big reason number one is that he has parachutist deployment zone, which means that when you deploy him, you can just put him automatically on the side of the table, but any side of the table, even if it's the back of the enemy deployment zone. And if we're partway through the game and they've forgotten about that possibility, or if they've just deployed poorly, suddenly you're deploying this trooper there. It's your active turn. They'll burst 1 on ARO, you're as many dice as your gun says that you have, and you can just start going around corners, you know, just shooting them, just killing them, just wrecking them, perforating them. Which is why I like the Spitfire the most, but other people take the other profiles too, which is fine. The other profiles are very, very good. But this is the model which is able to outposition them and outmaneuver them the most. In N3, the only person that could do this was Van Zandt. He was regarded as one of the best models in the game. The Razyat is now better than Van Zandt at doing that, which just blows my mind. Secondly, he comes with an Eclipse grenade, which is something not even Van Zandt has. The Eclipse grenade means that you can block line of sight to him as he's crossing, you know, to get into close combat with a particular target, or you can use them elsewhere on the table to set up, you know, an objective grab. There's nothing your opponent can do to stop you. At Phys 13, you're hitting the grenade in a 16 within the 8-inch good range band. So it's an extremely useful piece of tech. Third reason, this guy is brutal in close combat because he's CC21. He's got the MA2, which works like MA3 used to in the previous edition, but it stacks with Natural Born Warrior as well, so he can even take out sensitive models in their deployment zone, which are actually close combat specialists, and he can do it fairly reliably. He also is not going to care about them hitting him with a jammer, for example, because he's veteran. He's got stealth, so as he's creeping into close combat through the Eclipse grenades, they can't just dodge away from him. He has such amazing tech. Even the Armor 2 there's nice for, in case you lose a face-to-face roll in their deployment zone, which is kind of crazy. But the Spitfire profile is my favorite. This one here with the Specialist Combi Rifle emitter is probably the second favorite. The Boarding Shotgun is a bit of a maybe. You kind of have to trade him to get the best out of him in some situations with that profile, but I'm not sure if I'd want to trade him if I'm in such a good position with him and I've invested so heavily into him. But God, the Raziat, they just made him so powerful. They didn't need to give him Parachutist deployment zone, and he still would have been really, really good. And I still would have played him a fair bit. It just blows my mind how they can just disproportionately buff some of these unit profiles up and not others. They clearly haven't done very effective playtesting, and people generally that I talk to are agreeing with that. I mean, in the first month of N4, I just saw so many people scratching their heads and just wondering why some of these units get such a huge buff and other ones just get left there. Alright, time to talk about the first of our EI aspects, as they're known. These are models which typically represent the involved intelligence alien presence on the battlefield. The big, the badasses, they are usually your lieutenant when you take them. And the first of the four that we're going to discuss is called the Skiovoros. Not sure how to pronounce the name. Of the four available, he is the worst in my opinion. I never ran this guy in N3, and I'm not planning on running him in N4. Yes, he's got better. His movement speed is fine now with 4-4 speed. Plasma Rifle is still a good gun. Sepsitor Plus, still excellent. Having a hacking ability is still very good. The problem is his points cost, right? So, whereas the Anathematic came down in points, the Caronted Avatar, they are cheaper. This guy still seems to be pricey. And the question you ask is, what are you getting for all those points? What job is he going to excel at? And sadly, he needs to kind of do 2 or 3 different things to really excel. And in most games, he's only going to do one of those things well, so paying 50, 60 points for him isn't worth it. Let's go through the profiles. If he's just going to walk around the battlefield and just shoot things with his plasma rifle and do nothing much more than that, well, you could just be doing that with a 24-point Q drone. I think it's 24-point Q drone with a plasma rifle and assisted fire. Similarly well, all right, for less than half the points. Or you could, spend an extra 10, 15 points and have an Anathematic, which is way better at doing it because he's got Mimetism -6 in the camo state, blah, blah, blah. So when it comes to shooting, this guy just doesn't really compare. There are other things which do that a lot better. If it comes to hacking, well, surely you could be investing in a Bit and Kiss or something. Strong hackers in your deployment zones. Shroudeds, Malignos, hackers that have Mark State. This guy is a bit more of a sitting duck against enemy hackers. Imagine you're playing against me and you've got your beautiful Skiovoro in your deployment zone, and I happen to go first for some reason, and I fire a pitcher right across the battlefield with an 8 inches of your Skiovoro. I attack him with a Trinity, and then I attack him with a Trinity, and then he dies, and your lieutenant is dead. Sure, he's got Mnemonica, or Nemotech it's called now, but you just lost a 60-point model really easily. So doesn't feel particularly good. Whereas in your active turn, you have to do so much work getting him over there, getting through enemy AOs, finding targets for him to kill. Situational. Sure, people are going to report back, yeah, I had a good game with him, I had this game go well, but over a long period of games against people who are competent at Infinity, this guy's not one of the better tools. I'm sorry, but my opinion is unchanged between editions. The Raktarak is a very good model for Morats. He is for the sectorial. The beauty of this model is that he is a wildcard within the Morat sectorial, and he can join link teams which would otherwise be more expensive if he wasn't there. He can also bring his NCO along with that team and make them move more swiftly by spending Lieutenant's Order from elsewhere, and he has a good range of guns. But in Vanilla Combined Army. You don't need him because he isn't a cheerleader, he's too expensive for that, and he's not a attack piece because he's not well statted for that. So leave him at home if you're playing Vanilla Combined. Similarly, Kornak is a very good leader. He's a very good lieutenant if you're playing Morats. He cannot be the lieutenant in Vanilla Combined Army, which means that you are paying too many points for him. Running over the other side of the battlefield and bashing someone in close combat, that's something for Nokias to do for similar points. Just acting as an ARO piece, obviously that doesn't really work either. He's not a cheerleader. He's got some great abilities and stats, but he is for the Morite sectorial. He doesn't command the same respect and carry himself with as much dignity in the Vanilla Combined Army, where he's overshadowed by the rightfully overshadowed by the looming presence of the Carontid and the Anathematic and the Avatar. Korax Hashed, this is a Shazvasti character for their sectorial. I won't spend much time on him. Even in Shazvasti, I don't like him and I don't play him. He is like a weaker version of Shishkin. Maybe if you're playing some sort of like 100-point game and for some reason you need to make a link team with a really good Spitfire, I don't know what the argument is. I mean, you are either going to be dropping him from your list because you need to save points, or you splash out a little bit further on him. But if you've got more points to spend, you need to be converting this guy into a Shishkin who actually does shoot very, very well, or a Sargosh or whatever his name was. Sargosh. Yeah, I mean, Korax is a specialist operative, but usually within the context of Shazvasti, you usually have a specialist within your link team as well, backing up the shooter. So I just don't really see what he is there to do. He's got NWI Shock, sure, that's great. Again, I mean, it's not so much the points in Vanilla Combined, it's the fact that you're spending orders on a model, and spending orders is as costly as spending points is. It works the same way. You are investing something in it, and you can't afford to not get a really good return out of it. Alright, Kodali, it's a big one. God, this is going to be a long review. So, what's the time? So, really far into it. So, Kodali, I have complained about this unit throughout the editions. For those of you who don't know, Kodali can move into a smoke cloud which is generated by the Speculo Killer. So what happens is that she deploys near to their side of the table edge after you've thrown a smoke grenade with your Speculo Killer. There are a bunch of bat reps on my YouTube channel, by the way, which you can check out. And then she moves into the smoke template, triggering a dodge because you've come within 8 inches of them. They have to dodge at that point in the order sequence. So, again, just to recap, you've got the Speculo Killer, you activate it, you fire a smoke grenade from out of sight nearby. Kodali deploys on the side of the table with the parachutist ability. She then moves 8 inches, comes within range of an enemy model which is 8 inches away. They dodge because they can't really do anything else, or reset. And then you fire at them with the assault pistols. So burst 5, ballistical 14, plus 3 for range on 17s. And they just die unless they crit the dodge, basically. So it's a pretty negative play experience for people on the receiving end of that. I must say, though, that for people expecting her, or if they've got a lot of crazy koalas and mines and stuff set up, a lot of cheap troops along the sides, she doesn't always do that well, so it's a bit situational. But the thing that bothers me is that it's even possible to do that. So you've got these very swingy games where, you know, you don't really feel like it's much of a game. You're just using a very gimmicky tactic to cause the other person to have a really bad time. The main reason why I do that to people is really just to create awareness that this is in the game. I just want more people to be aware that it's a bit of a lopsided game mechanic and not a very great interaction, in the hopes that Corvus Belli will change it one day. Hilariously, they had a chance to change it with this most recent edition and didn't. They made it more powerful because now not even link teams can get around that. Previously, a link team could delay once you came within 8 inches with Kodali while you're in a smoke template. And then when you shoot them, they can respond with a chain rifle or a flamethrower or their combi rifle, but they can't anymore, which makes that tactic even more powerful. She's brutal. I mean, even if you're not shooting at that close range, the combi rifle's amazing. She's gotten better at close combat because now you can stack the CC-19 with the MA2, which is better than which is like MA3 used to be, with Prothion on top of that. So she's very, very good. If you're playing Onyx, that's when you might want to bring one of these guys into the Link team, because she gains some abilities to link in Onyx, and I believe possibly NCO as well, although that might be one of the other units she links with. The other profiles I don't like as much for Vanilla Combined Army, because they have less sort of surprise factor. You can sort of see her coming, dodge out of the way. Actually, she's got stealth, so maybe not so much dodging, but you've got more ground to cross. Even with 4 deployment plus 4, she has to get there first, and the thing is, she might have to cross the line of fire of flash pulses and sniper rifles and missile launchers. Okay, let's move on to the Caronted. Another one of the big bad aspects, one of the few things in the game to actually possess multispectral visor level 3. There's a bunch of very good profiles. The one profile that stands out and that almost everybody takes is this one right here, the Lieutenant with MSV3 heavy machine gun. So, would you want to take the Caronted without making it your Lieutenant? I don't think so. The reason why you want the Lieutenant is because it comes with Nematech, meaning that if he dies, you can transfer your willpower and your Lieutenant ability to someone else rather than going to lost Lieutenant. That's a big deal. And because when you're trying to win the roll for the initiative at the start of the game, your willpower 16. So for those two reasons, it makes much more sense for this model to be the Lieutenant. Given what it's good at, high ballistic skill, high armor, and a multispectral visor, it's much better with the HMG than it is with the plasma rifles. So that's why people typically take that profile. I know that some people like the plasma rifle Sepsitor, but with that one, you're having to waddle your way from your deployment zone into range onto their side of the table. It'll put you in range sometimes of hacking, sometimes of jammers, sometimes of mad traps, sometimes unexpected hidden deployment shooters or hackers. It's just a bit more of a risk. You're going to get more value from more games when you take this particular profile compared to the other ones. It's just simple as that. Yes, the hacker's good. Yes, it's good to have the bonuses there. Yes, the Sepsitor is good. Yes, it's great if you get in range. You can force them to either dodge the plasma rifle, either dodge the Sepsitor or shoot back against the plasma rifle. They're in a bad spot. It's just the getting there and surviving once you're getting there that is the problem, whereas the heavy machine gun allows you a much better piece which can control the game, shoot down enemy arrows, etc., etc. I like the Caronted a little bit less than I did in the last edition, just because now we are in a meta where crits don't cut through armor immediately. So even though the Caronted loves to fire through a smoke grenade at an enemy tag, if that tag happens to be a Yotum or an enemy Marut or Avatar or something like that, with high armor, it's not that easy to rip them to shreds anymore, because even having to pass an additional armor save with a crit, the HMG is still just damage 15. They may end up passing a lot of armor saves, and you may end up wasting your orders as a result. He is generally cheaper though, and he is still a very, very good, powerful, strong unit. If you like the way he looks, definitely recommend playing him at some point. There's nothing wrong with him except for that small point that I made, but that may not be enough to deter people from taking him. I will certainly run him occasionally, and he's also, very strong against camo heavy metas, where if you have a lot of opponents who take camo markers all the time, the MSV3 is really, really strong. So Garat, this guy was a laughingstock in the last edition. He was really bad back then. He has gotten a lot better. So, 2 wounds plus NWI, nice. +1 damage, excellent. He's a little bit better in close combat slightly. His guns, the loadout, the Feuerbach +1 burst is lovely. Having AP on the HMG is even better in this edition. Points cost, kind of reasonable. Only reason why I still wouldn't run him is that we still have that brutal comparison between him and the Overdrawn Bat-Droid. So the Overdrawn Bat-Droid looks to me like it's actually cheaper than the Sogarat now. So let's go back to the Sogarat. If you take... The profile that I like the most, by the way, is the NCO APHMG, because, you're very tough, you're pretty good at shooting. So that's 58 points for that profile. Or if we come down to the Overdrawn over here, you could pay 63 points for the HRMC. So for an extra 5 points... They basically have the same armor BTS, sure, that checks out. But the Overdrone gets tactical awareness, so +1 order that it can use, and the Sogaret doesn't. The Overdrone gets the 10-bot albedo, which the Sogaret doesn't. The firewall against hacking, if you're walking across the board and shooting things, that's pretty good. The ability to be gizmo kitted is nice from a distance. Extra damage on the gun, that's nice. And by the way, HRMC is +1 burst. So for 5 points, let's just go through it again. You are 3 structure points rather than 2 wounds plus NWI. So if you go into remote presence, if you've taken 5 wounds on your Overdrone, you can be revived, whereas the Sogarat is just gone off the table after 3 wounds. So that's the first thing. Tactical awareness, there's a whole extra order you can use. An extra burst on your gun, and an albedo for 5 points against the Sogaret. So once we start making those kinds of comparisons, it's just, you look back at this guy and go, well, they tried to buff him. They tried to make him good. They tried to make it so that people would take him. I am not going to be running this guy in Vanilla Combined Army in N4 unless something significant changes. The Feuerbach profile, you can talk about a similar kind of thing, right? I mean, compare him to the Plasma Sniper Overdrone. We come up with a similar story. It's just that simple. In Morats, he's a maybe. You have to consider what link teams you can make out of him. That's beyond the scope of this video. He's a lovely model, so definitely think more about this guy if you're going to be playing Morats, the Sectorial. But Vanilla Combined, maybe not. Okay, the Anathematic. This is another guy that I put on my short list of... Oh boy! Yeah, this guy is a beast. So in the last edition, you could pay something like 88 points for a guy who was your lieutenant with a plasma rifle, who could be a very powerful hacker. He's a bit different now. The draw before was that he could put assisted fire up with his lieutenant order. Now it's a bit different because he's an offensive hacker. I can't think of any other hacking models in the game outside of this faction, offhand, that have willpower 16. That is a huge willpower to have for hacking. Not even the Interventor. Like, nothing in Nomads has as high on the willpower as the Anathematic does. So being a brutal hacker at willpower 16, BTS 6, is the first thing we need to look at, which is absolutely huge. Moreover, he is in hidden deployment if he's not the lieutenant, or marker state if he is, so you don't have to worry so much about them firing pitches across your side of the board and hacking you from range. Not going to happen. But they do have to worry about you walking up to their repeater and hacking you. Another thing about this model which is crucial is that he is a heavy infantry model. He is not a light infantry or medium infantry model. So Interventors, for example, Mary Problems, your zero killer hacker, whoever you may be, those guys can't benefit from fairy dust, whereas if you take your E-drone and maybe you need him for, assisted jump, control jump for your Razyat or whatever, or assisted fire on your Q-drone, he can also put up fairy dust, which means the Anathematic will impose that further firewall on the enemy. So let's say they've taken 3 hackers. You walk up to a random flash pulse bot at the side of the board with fairy dust on. They have a firewall to protect them, you have a firewall to protect you, but your willpower 16, it's your active turn, your BTS 6. You have +1 burst on your Trinity. So guess who's coming out better off on that one? I had a game recently where the guy took 4 Xanshi hackers, and my Anathematic just walked up to his repeater and just slaughtered them all. It was hilarious. It was the most fun I had with hacking for a long time. So another thing here, if he's not your lieutenant, and this is one reason why I actually kind of like the profile that's not your lieutenant, he can stay in hidden deployment and hack them once they come close to your deployment zone, which can be pretty good. Also, if this profile is hit by an Oblivion, it means you're not in Lost Lieutenant, whereas it does mean that if you have Mnemonica and you were the lieutenant, because isolation doesn't kill you. We did cover that fact when we talked about Nokias. So let's go through the profiles. This profile is definitely the most popular. That one's going to be the doozy, because if you're willpower 16, you've got Mnemonica, that's generally where you want to put your lieutenant stock. It also saves you from spending an extra SWC on a cheap lieutenant elsewhere. So that's the main one to take. The secondary guy that I like, that I'm taking quite a lot, is the non-lieutenant, but still hacker, so I can put him in hidden deployment and then react with him later and go out and do some serious hacking without worrying about him getting hit by an Oblivion so badly. Because even with Oblivion hitting him, he's still this big body that hangs out with a plasma gun. If you, for some reason, aren't sold on those profiles, you might consider a couple of other ones here. So, there's one profile that has a Sepsitor. There is a list that I occasionally used in the past where the Chirontid was the lieutenant. The list also had an Anathematic. The Anathematic would stay in hidden deployment until it was my turn. Then he would race to the other side of the table and have a shootout with them where they were either having to deal with the Plasma Rifle or the Sepsitor. So you put them under that immense pressure. And that's the profile that you'd be taking if you're doing an all-in, aggressive, all-out, charging straight at their face Anathematic. And that's the profile that you'd want. There's also this profile, which I've never taken in all my years of playing Infinity, but I've always looked at it. It's a way of getting monofilament, and the Spitfire arguably is a much better gun than a plasma rifle if you're just in it to win face-to-face rolls and clear up cheaper, lightly armored troopers. The plasma rifle is just so much more damaging and more dangerous if you get over their side with the template. But again, the Spitfire, slightly better range, slightly better damage in terms of like the actual damage value. I'm not talking about the amount of armor saves you take. And it is a cheaper profile relative to the other ones. So I can't blame you if you take this. If somebody showed up with this, I couldn't really call them a bad player or anything. I think this is a really decent profile. It's just that the two profiles that are able to hack really are where it is, because he's got Marcus State and he's got all of the stats in the world and abilities of the world to make hacking just an absolutely brutal thing. I quite like combining this guy with Bit and Kiss. So Bit and Kiss can move out there with Kiss as the hacker, but also firing a pitcher. That can be really, really powerful if you love hacking. And hacking is a great thing at the moment to get around factions that are going to be relying on tags. If you think your opponent's going to be playing like Joan of Arc with a cutter and a Tick Belang, for example, you can really thwart that kind of list with hacking. I mean, you could Oblivion Joan, that's lights out. You could put Total Control on their cutter. You could do a bunch of things, and they may not be able to get to grips with you because all of your stuff's in Marcus State and hiding away and just getting ready to fire pitches. The Anathematic is just an absolute beast. He's better than he was in N3. I've got to say that. He was great in N3, but he's become stronger and more powerful. I just love this guy. I'm putting him into so many of my combined army lists. Soviet heavy infantry. Now these guys are interesting. They are a really good choice in vanilla. In the Morat sectorial. So straight away, I'm going to be recommending. You'll be seeing this guy a lot, the MSV-1 heavy rocket launcher. This guy is gold in the Morat sectorial. I have been seeing the Lieutenant HMG +1 order in Onyx, because in Onyx you can take Nokias and you can NCO off of the Lieutenant +1 order. Would you take this profile in vanilla combined army? I think there's an argument for it. I think that realistically, if you want to put your HMG on this guy and you feel confident that he's going to do the job with it, it's a pretty powerful profile if you're going to use those +1 Lieutenant order. I mean, put it this way, even if you're not running Nokias, if he's the model doing the active turn shooting, gunning them down, he's got +2 orders to do it with. Just make sure you're taking chain of command if this is the way that you're going. Immunity AP, very rare. Jungle terrain, handy. Religious, can be useful, can be bad actually sometimes. The only thing I don't particularly like about this is that if you're putting your heavy machine gun on this guy, he's Bliss skill 13, he's 4 dice. Sometimes he's not quite going to be cracking their heavy infantry model in their link team with the rocket launcher. Like if it's a Knight of Justice missile launcher, Bliss skill 17, it's kind of hard to crack with BS 13 4 dice. If you're up against a tag, you don't quite have that AP HMG, which, you know, you're kind of wishing you're taking, a tag of your own, or the HRMC on your Overdron, that kind of thing. So that's where maybe he's probably better in Onyx, but definitely if you're playing Morats, the sectorial, you're probably going to be wanting to look into the Suryats because they are very good in that sectorial. Boarding action Shishkin. We talked about Shishkin earlier. This is a more expensive version of Shishkin. She has armor 4 instead of armor 1 and the nano screen. But all of the other abilities seem to be fairly similar. I don't like this profile as much as I did in the previous edition because Martial Arts level 4 now means that you've basically got +3 to your CC and -3 to the opponent's CC, but she previously had +1 burst, and now she doesn't. So the maximum number of wounds that you can gain off an enemy if you just charge into close combat and take a bunch of arrows in the process is 1. So the rate at which you are, scooping wounds back up off them, it's a bit slower. I mean, trying to take out something like McMurrah it gets a little bit harder. Yeah, it worries me. I mean, 63 points is a lot of points to pay. For that amount of points, you could get the aforementioned Overdrawn. Exactly the same points for a guy with a hyper rapid magnetic cannon. Shishkin really is about getting into close combat though and doing the shooting, so unless you feel confident you're going to get a lot of mileage out of doing both, I kind of find it hard to justify her. When Nokias gets over there, he gets over there in a bit more of a slippery kind of way because he's got Cyber Mask. She is faster because she's 6'4", so that is a big deal. Nokias does have the +1 burst, but then Nokias is a lot cheaper, like quite a lot cheaper, almost 20 points cheaper. So it's a hard sell for me. I'd be more likely to take her in Shazvasti for sure. In Vanilla Combined, I'm just a bit hesitant because of that 63 point price tag. You're expecting tag level resilience for that, but instead you're getting kind of situational close combat and shooting ability. The Red Fury, again, damage 15, pretty good. It's just not wonderful for cutting through armor. So you might get rebuffed by a Knight of Justice missile launcher or a Raicho shooting you from a long way away, and it's quite hard for her to close the distance. Okay, the Raicho. This guy was kind of maligned in the previous edition. He's become much better. In fact, so much better. I think that he's one of the better things in this sectorial. If you're taking a tag with just plain old 8 armor, it can now stand up to a lot. You've got to be careful because he's got religious troop instead of remote presence. So if you're stuck against something which does have the ability to actually rip you a new one, like a Shang-Chi APHMG or a Vet Kazakh APHMG in a 5-man link team shooting directly at you, and you're failing your willpower checks to duck back into cover, that could be a bit of a problem. But with the new crit mechanic, Armor 8 in cover, it's no joke. You have a pretty good chance of surviving for a long time. I love the fact that he's actually immune to critical, so if you are baiting your opponent into just shooting you and throwing that massive weight of dice against you over and over and over, their criticals aren't going to provide that extra armor save for you to take, so that is extremely handy. If he's going over to the other side of the table to attack, the ECM on hackers is very, very useful. Obviously, tactical awareness standard for tags. He's got a few different loadouts though, so they all look rather useful. This one with a heavy rocket launcher gives you a very dangerous alternative shot back at them. So if they're a link team or anything, they can't cluster up their guys. They've got to send just one guy in to shoot at you. Most of the time, the multi-HMG is better though for the explosive round rather than the continuous damage. But this is the cheapest profile, so therefore I'm most attracted to it. The heavy shotgun mine dispenser, you pay a few more points for that, but if you like the idea of dispensing the mines and having that shotgun for the template weapon, that is also a very good profile. I see nothing wrong with it. And then finally, the NCO. This is probably the one that I'd run the most if I'm building the list around him. If he's the star of the show, if I'm not taking too many other Rambo-type troops, that's when he is the NCO trooper. If I'm putting the Raicho and Nokias in the same list, which you can quite easily do, I would run probably the cheap profile to save points, and then Nokias, and he can use the Lieutenant's Order with NCO. All round, Raicho is much better. The edition welcomes him with loving, welcoming arms. And if you love the model as much as I do, go out and get him, because he is actually a sane, solid, reasonable choice for many Vanilla Combined Army lists. Can't say that about the Avatar, though, because the Avatar is not just reasonable, he's just busted. He's surely top 5 models in the game now for N4. At the end of N3, he had just sort of reached the cusp of being like too powerful, because they gave him tactical awareness without reducing his points at all. And now what's happened to him is that he's come down in cost. He hasn't really lost anything except for the Strategos level 3 gimmick. And he's benefited greatly from the new crit mechanic, being armor 9, meaning that crits, you can pass 2 armor saves quite easily in a lot of cases. And he still retains, his stats as immunity to possession, but he's gained remote presence, so now he doesn't get removed from the table once he, takes, once you fail a save with your engineering check. Quite crucially, the rules for Nemotech say that if you transfer his lieutenant ability to somebody else, you take him away. But you do at least have the option of leaving him unconscious, deliberately allowing yourself to go into Lost Lieutenant, and repairing him. Note that that's much more relevant in your active turn. Let's say you spend 2 orders on him, he shoots something, gets drastically unlucky, reduced to unconscious level 2 state. It's still your turn, you revive him, he's not dead by the end of the turn, so you don't go into Lost Lieutenant. That is something you couldn't do in the previous edition. So he's actually more resilient, much more resilient, and more forgiving than he was in the previous edition. Now, between these two profiles, you'd always take the one that gives you +1 order, because he's always going to be the Lieutenant. So you've got the 10 orders in the group that you start with, +2 orders from the Lieutenant, which get turned into normal regular orders because of Strategos. And then he has a tactical awareness order on top of that. If you're playing in an environment where you're using the ITS Season 11 rules, where spending a command token from your opponent won't subtract 2 orders from you if you're running a 10 order list, you've got 13 orders to spend on your avatar, which can walk around the table just blasting everybody. Most of the time you don't even want to do that. You want to attack them with your Speculo Killer or Speculo Plus Kodali or Nokias, just using those 12 orders just to rush around murdering people and drinking their blood, basically. So what more can I say about him? I mean, he has the multi-HMG as standard, BS 15, damage 16, so he's amazing at shooting. There's very few things in the game that can beat him when it's his active turn. Sepsitor Plus is particularly nasty if you get around the other side of the table and force him to choose between dodging it or just taking the multi-HMG shots straight to the face. That is particularly brutal. At Willpower 17, he's much harder to beat with hacking, much harder to hit with a guided missile or a spotlight, for example, with ECM for guided. So that kind of tactic makes him harder to take down. If he gets isolated, he can actually reset out of it on something like an 8 if it's -9. It just goes on and on and on and on. I mean, the context, the environment, we're now playing more compact lists where there are less camo spam lists. People are investing into heavy infantry and things which he can engage and take on more effectively. He is the most powerful thing in Combined Army at the moment, possibly the most oppressive thing in the game at the moment. So if you like winning, do consider him, because the model is more powerful than it needs to be at the moment. I hope that Corvus Belli do a few things just to rein him in a little bit and just nerf him a little bit, because he's a bit much. And I'm saying that as a diehard Combined Army player. The Sphinx is another extremely expensive tag, which got reduced in cost significantly. I think that he is good. I don't think he's anywhere near as good as the Avatar is, and he sort of plays a bit of a different game. This guy is not there to act so much as an ARO piece. The Avatar absolutely can do that. This guy can't so much because he's only armor 6, so he kind of struggles, and the Spitfire range band BS14 doesn't quite do it as well, despite having the Mimetism -6. This guy, I mean, he's so fast. Fastest tag in the game. We've got almost motorbike level speeds here at 6'6", and he's good in close combat. He's got Marcus State. He's got Climbing Plus, which is better than Super Jump. He's got that amazing mobility, tactical awareness. So for your investment, he's extremely dangerous. There's just a few things which rein him in a little bit, which I am wary of. Hacking is now a really big deal in this game, and people tend to take a lot of hackers. Your ability to get into line of sight and get the good fire lanes from the midfield might be a bit limited if your opponent has a bunch of hackers in Marcus State and maybe even in hidden deployment. And if your guy just gets oblivioned or hit by total control out in the midfield, that could cause you to lose the game, whereas the Avatar can hang back a bit, shoot from long range, generally use the rest of his army to crush you. The Sphinx has kind of got to do it himself because that's where you've invested the points. It's a bit questionable. It's a bit more difficult. Don't get me wrong though, in the hands of a good player, if the table's laid out right and a good matchup, you can really crush with this guy. The way to use the Sphinx, in my opinion, is to have it in one of your army lists and just have a secondary army list which is going to be able to deal with those situations I talked about. If you're on a table where you don't like the look of it for attacking with a 24-inch gun and using Climbing Plus, and if you think you're up against a faction that's going to have a lot of camo state midfield hackers, you can take your other list, right? So he's very much usable in Vanilla Combined. He's definitely usable in Shazvasti and Onyx as well. To be honest, I would probably be more likely to run him if I was dedicated to one of the sectorials, honestly. Whereas in Vanilla Combined, you've got so many other brutal options over here that I'd rather take one of these bad boys rather than the Sphinx at the moment in Vanilla Combined. The Zeodron Batroids. Now these guys, they've gotten better. The new crit mechanic helps them. Their speed is more in line with the Umbras, which they can link with in Onyx. Bioimmunity means they basically got +6 to either armor or BTS the entire time with the way that works. The thing that makes these guys a bit better is the K1 Marksman Rifle. It gives you that tool to be able to defeat that Jotun just sitting in cover, whereas an AP HMG, even with armor piercing, you don't feel that great about shooting into that kind of target, whereas the K1 Marksman Rifle can really keep it honest. I still don't love these guys. BS13 and no other mods to impose on them, and even the K1 Marksman Rifle's just 3 shots in the active turn. You can find yourself, with BS13 and 3 shots, you can find yourself losing shootouts against the odd flash pulse spot, or if there's a surprise Noctur missile launcher, you could feel in a really bad way. If the table's closed off by an enemy sniper at a link team, it's quite hard to gun it down with this guy. So sort of depends on who's backing him up, but in Vanilla Combined, I just don't love him. For a few more points, you can get that Overdron we were talking about. So just looking at the Overdron right now, the comparison is still there, just like it was last edition. You're spending a few more points, and you're getting a guy with just a much more powerful gun, and you kind of want that kind of range with your gun if you're starting your deployment zone, and if you can only move a maximum of 8 per order, 4-4 speed or 6-2 speed. Either way, you've got to close a lot of distance to get in range with a marksman rifle or a K1, for example, multi-rifle. Whereas the Overdron, he's kind of got a more appropriate loadout for those kinds of range bands. Speaking of which, we are on the Overdron. I feel like I've already discussed him. He's a very solid ARO piece, and he can actually pick off things at long range, and his albedo is going to be a godsend against things like a Marut or an Intruder, or an enemy Charonted, things like that. So if you're going to invest in that kind of light tag in Vanilla Combined, do go with the Overdron as my recommendation. They're very, very good. I love the remote presence. He can take a lot of beating and still be revived back to full health by your Caliban engineer or Medtech Obsidon engineer. So this guy, he's great. All of the profiles, I love how he's just been given a submachine on this profile. This is probably the most popular one, by the way, is the heavy rocket launchers, because it's the cheapest, but it's still very nasty in arrow, and it's still burst 3 in attack, and having a short range gun to go with it, that is really cool. So that's my pick of the profiles, but the other two are just stellar as well. It's a way of getting that 5 burst HRMC into your list without playing in a sectorial. Unidrons will skip. You would never want to take a Unidron in Vanilla Combined Army. These guys are for Onyx. They are not good as cheerleaders. They're too expensive to be cheerleaders when you can take Icadrons and Imitrons and Ardrons. These guys are full link teams, and you can't link them in Vanilla Combined. The M-Drone, at 16 points, it doesn't make a very cheap cheerleader. This is a model you want to take if you're worried about models in camo state in the midfield taking advantage of you, maybe going second turn at a mission where they're in hidden deployment, they're just going to jump out and press a button and win. If you're worried about that kind of play, that's when the M-Drone is a bit more useful in your lists. He can fight a little bit with his combi rifle, he can move a repeater around, but unless you're getting the full value of his skills, 16 points is a bit much for him just to sit in your deployment zone and do nothing. So have a clear game plan in mind when you go for the old sensor bot, because you need to make use of sensor, otherwise he's a bit overcosted. But if you are making use of sensor, he's a bargain. That's really basically it. Triangular fire, forward observer, the other sort of peripheral abilities he's got, they're fine, but again, it's the sensor as to whether he's going to be make or break in my view. Q-Drone, all of the other factions have a TR bot like this guy, but this guy has mimetism for the same price, so it's like a faction inbuilt exclusive advantage that you have. The Q-Drone is excellent for that reason. TR bots are already useful models because they can have 4 dice on the attack, which is where they should be doing most of their work. Sometimes on defense, newbie players think that that's the only thing they're good at. That's actually the thing that they're worst at, but it still comes in handy sometimes if you position them well. You just got to be very careful about what parts of the table you're watching. You don't just want to give your opponent a chance to shoot them for free. The plasma rifle, that's a model to take if you already have the long-range guns handled. Like if you've already got a really good HMG in your list and you don't see the need to take a second one, having a plasma rifle there can be kind of handy for racing up the board, especially if he's got assisted fire and taking advantage of enemies that are a little bit clumped up with the template. It can be severely damaging. You're imposing a -3 for mimetism. You might be ignoring their cover if you have assisted fire, and he's very fast at getting across the board, so the plasma rifle is good. Most of the time, though, his job is just going to be a cheap HMG, which is hard to remove. It can go prone now, because the new N4 rules, remotes can go prone. So he's good at just sort of annoying them in the late game as a reactive piece, or actually picking off easier to kill targets. You don't want to charge him in against something like a Knight of Justice missile launcher or link team or Kamau sniper, but against their war core or their flash bots, little easier targets, the HMG is the way to go. T-Drone was kind of a bit maligned in the previous edition, but smart missile bots in general are very, very good now because you can spotlight people in the reactive turn. It's not -3 to spotlight them, and there's various different ways of getting spotlight into things which will target them, and then you're firing a missile from total cover, hitting them on an 18. I am taking T-Drones frequently, so if you're a new player, make sure you pick up that remotes box which has the remotes in it, and you can use one of them as a T-Drone. Keep it in total cover, the back of your deployment zone, in cover, somewhere in the middle, where you can actually get, you know, the proper range to everything. At the end of the game, if it's done its work and there are no other targets, you can actually stand up and it can act as an arrow piece, but don't do that at the start of the game because it'll be too easy to defeat. Their HMG with BS-13 or 14 against your 1 missile, BS-12 with 1 dice. You're not going to win any reactive defensive shootouts, but later in the game you can annoy them by standing up with a missile launcher after they've lost a bunch of units and they can't really afford to go after him. During the early part of the game, though, he's there for taking advantage of models that have been hacked with the Spotlight hacking program that have the targeted state, and he just excels at that for, you know, a very good price. The R-Drone, Flashbot, extremely cheap, and they're more deadly now because the Flash Pulse inflicts 2 BTS saves compared to the last edition. These guys can and should be in your lists. They are cheerleaders. They are there to defend your deployment zone so effectively, and they do it so cheaply, and they are speed 6/6. Nothing to say about the Combined Army version. This is the same as other factions get, but they're extremely useful and desirable piece to have in your army, so make sure you buy some remotes so that you can have some R-Drones in there. Slave Drone is just your bog standard helper bot for your doctors and engineers, same as other factions get, nothing special about them. I do like taking them in Combined Army because you have so many of these little Icadrons and Imitrons and Q-Drones and R-Drones spread out across your deployment zone. If you're able to revive them, that's even better because they go prone after taking a hit. So if they're behind a wall, standing up behind a wall, the R-Drone might drop prone or the Q-Drone drops prone and it goes into remote presence state. It goes into unconscious level 2, for example, and if you have a slave drone which is also prone nearby, it can go and repair it. So these guys are very, very good value, just as they were in previous edition, probably even more so. The Icadron is an essential cheerleader. It provides an order of return. It doesn't really do any attacking. You're probably not going to spend any orders on it, but it defends your deployment zone so well for having the choice of a flamethrower or a flash pulse or a pistol whenever something comes in the line of sight of it, which is amazing. If there's something that's ended their turn nearby, the 6-2 movement with the combination of those things, the double flamethrower, flash pulse pistol, even the para close combat weapon can punish them. It can be your tool of flushing them out of your deployment zone. And at 9 points on a guy that provides a repeater for your hacking that can go prone, it's really, really good as a cheerleader. I mean, other factions can take like an 8-point flash bot, an 8-point baggage bot, which does nothing essentially apart from baggage and a repeater, and then there are drones, whereas your faction can take a 9-point baggage bot, which actually has all these guns and stuff. So it's a big benefit to Combined Army, one of the strengths of Combined Army, to have access to this essential unit. E-drones, these guys used to be like 28 points because they could do all sorts of weird hacking. Now they can only do a few jobs, but this will combo with your Anathematic because it'll put Fairy Dust on him because he's a heavy infantry. It will put down Assisted Fire for your Q-drone. It will put down Controlled Jump for your Dropsuit TIE Yacht, which we're about to talk about next, or your Razjet or your Fractile with Boarding Shotgun. So if you're going to be doing one of those 3 things, you would consider him. If you're going to be doing 2 out of 3 of those things, you should strongly consider him. And if you're doing like 3 out of 3 of those things, he's almost essential. So for example, I write a list that has an Anathematic Hacker, it has a Dropsuit TIE Yacht, and it has a Q-drone. That army list ought to have an E-drone in it as well, because you are able to put Fairy Dust in your Anathematic if you need to. You can put a Controlled Jump on your Dropsuit if you need to. You can put Assisted Fire on your Q-drone if you need to. So this guy's impact, his abilities, his tools are a bargain for his points. But again, if you're not going to be doing those 3 things, you leave them at home. You don't look back. There are cheaper things you can take, just to add points, like this Echidron here. So then we come to the Dropsuit TIE Yacht itself. He has this interesting ability where he does the combat jump explosion, much like the Liu Jing in the Yuqing faction can do, meaning that you pick a point to drop him in, so you make the roll to land him, and then there's an explosion around him which enemies have to dodge or take like a damage 12 shock hit or something like that. I think it's a damage 12 shock hit. But having the E-drone there with control jump means that he's going to land on a 15 rather than a 12. This guy is reasonable. He doesn't do much outside of that. BS11, not very good at shooting. His points cost is kind of average, kind of in the Cadmus sort of range. If you're going to take a guy like this at all, I'd recommend taking the absolute dirt cheapest one, because they can all combat jump in the same way. This guy just does it the most cheaply. And then if for some reason he survives the jump, he uses the boarding shotgun most effectively because he's already in short range to do it. He could switch to the heavy pistol if he really needs to, but the boarding shotgun gives you 2 slugs at +6 to hit, which he needs at that range. Or if they are shooting back at him, he can just plant 2 templates on them, and the templates won't use his ballistic skill. And when he's got such a low ballistic skill, that is really the way to go. So he's pretty good. I mean, he's not going to care about a jammer if he lands next to it because he's veteran. 22 points. If you can land him next to something crucial like a very important enemy hacker or a sniper which is watching the board, or a lieutenant, and if he manages to either kill them with a combat jump explosion or land successfully behind them and blast them with a boarding shotgun, he's easily been worth the 22 points. If he fails his drop, he can deploy safely in your deployment zone, and he's just an overcosted cheerleader, and all you've really lost is the extra points you would have spent on him rather than a random R-drone or Echidron. So he's not bad. I actually do think about running him a fair bit. You can take more of them in Morats, but this is a reasonable unit. It's not an especially overpowered, extremely powerful unit. Neither is a trash tier unit. It's a above average unit. It's really decent. Speaking of above average, we come to the Shrouded. Most factions have access to a infiltrating specialist trooper, which is in the midfield in Marcus State. This is one of those units. This is the Combined Army's version of the midfield Marcus State infiltrator, and this guy does the job rather well. So Shazvasti means that if he's unconscious at the end of the game, you may not lose points for him. He may count as points still. All these other abilities here are bog standard for the kind of trooper he is. Regeneration has changed, so if they shoot him and he goes unconscious and they don't shoot him again, maybe because he went prone, dropped behind a wall as a result of going unconscious, you roll a dice and he has a 60% chance of just coming back alive again. You can't say that about the Zero. You can't say that about the Guilong. The Foxtrot can't do that. The SAS can't do that. having a guy that just has a 60% chance of being revived for free, I'd say that's pretty good. I'd say that's really good. And then there's his abilities, right? So you can take all the different things you could normally take. Unfortunately, the Dazer Mine Layer is not so good. I mean, it was great last edition, but the Dazer, unfortunately, doesn't provide a saturation zone anymore, which is why it's kind of lame. Also, you know, enemy troopers which have total terrain actually speed up, so you're basically giving them a speed boost for going through it. So we won't talk so much about that profile anymore. But the profiles that we do want to look at, number one, the Hacker. So if he's in the midfield, you only have to break him out of camo state and hack them if you know the coast is clear. Like, if you know you're not going to get hacked by some killer hacker in the near future, that's when you can break him out. Your opponent also doesn't necessarily know he's a hacker until they come close. So if they're dumb enough to move their tag within 8 inches of him, then you can go surprise and move out, and you can actually Oblivion or Total Control or Spotlight or, you know, Carbonite. All of those are valid choices. If they're not a tag and they just walk past them and they don't have stealth, you can break out of camo and spotlight them, and then your T-drone can fire a missile at them if they don't shake off the targeted state with a reset. Also, if they don't do that and you start shooting them with a combi rifle or something, well, that's +3 to hit. It's pretty good. And then you've got the mines, you've got all of his other normal abilities. So the Hacker is excellent. This is my favorite Shrouded profile. We also have the Fort Observer, which means that you have a midfield specialist, very reliable, even cheaper than the Hacker, and the Shrouded can't be hacked by a Trinity or something, so that's probably the next best one. But it's also close because the Mine Layer, if you don't need him to be a specialist, well, you have a guy out there who lays a mine. You've got 2 camo markers. You can start to play a bit of a shell game. They don't know which marker's the Shrouded. They don't know which one's the Mine, which one's the Caliban. The Liberto is not quite as good at doing that because the Liberto himself doesn't have Mimetism -3. But if you have a Shrouded, a Caliban, a Shrouded Mine Layer, and a Liberto, which is pretty reasonable in a combined army list, then even the Liberto is contributing a mine which may or may not be, you know, one of the other aforementioned models from the opponent's perspective. Then there's the Killer Hacker. So if you know you're going to be running up into enemy Guilong hackers or enemy Zero hackers or whatever they may have, the Killer Hacker is excellent. This is your personal flavoring and personal preference, the meta, what else is in your army list. You're probably going to be taking one of these 4 profiles. The other ones, Boarding Shotgun, non-specialist, a bit more situational, multi-sniper, a little bit weak on the Blister skill, but still useful. They're not out of the question. They are still good. It's just that these are the main 4 profiles which I really love. Shroudeds are excellent. They should be in the vast majority of your vanilla combined army lists. And that's one of the reasons why I recommended picking up the Wildfire Shazvasti box set, because it comes with an absolutely beautiful Shrouded Hacker model in it, which you will be using for the rest of your combined army career. Now, his big brother, the Malignos, is a little bit less tasty because he's rather expensive, and a lot of the time you can kind of get the job done with your Shrouded Hacker. The thing I like about him, if you can afford him, 39 points is a walloping investment as far as I'm concerned. He combines the hacking prowess with +1 willpower and hidden deployment, meaning that they may not know that he's there, and they may walk their tag in range only to get possessed, or they may walk their really important model within range and you might hit them with a spotlight. They might even come into range of your hacking area on their second short skill, meaning that they move, nothing happens because you can't ARO them. They move again, they come into your area, you willpower them 14, spotlight goes off, and suddenly they're targeted. If they reset, you just target them again, or if they don't reset, you missile them with your T-drone. So that is a pretty hefty surprise move. Don't like the multi-sniper as much because to get the optimal range, you're going to be wanting to be near your deployment zone, and then you need to be investing in a Noctur instead, which does the job way better with the missile launcher. A lot of people like the monofilament mines. Again, I just think it's situational. I mean, he ends up really wasting the points here if he doesn't have a good target to lay the mine in front of. It's open information what the mine is as soon as he lays it, and even if they have a tag, the chances of the tag dodging the mine or passing the armor save on damage 12, even though they don't have armor, is still significant. So he's a bit too situational for my liking. I just do want to acknowledge that a lot of people really do like this profile and just speak the world of it. It's not for me, but some people really like that profile. Then there's the Fort Observer and the Killer Hacker for the same reasons that the Shroudeds do those jobs very well. The Malignos, for the extra points, you're bringing Mimetism -6 and better willpower. He still has regeneration, blah da 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 da. So if you've got the extra points to spare, yes, you get something for those extra points. It's just that if all you need to do is complete the job that the Shrouded's there to do, in my army list, I don't often see the reason to put out that extra investment. But hey, I mean, it just depends on what's in the rest of your list, how many points you have to play with. If I'm playing larger games, like a 400-point game, I probably would consider the Malignos a little bit more. They are very good. It's just the Shrouded just really hits that sweet spot for the points as far as I'm concerned. Okay, Specular Killer, the iconic Combined Army unit. It's much feared by opponents. It is still very powerful. CC 22 plus MA2, very, very strong. This guy is very much unchanged from the previous edition. One small thing is that when he throws a smoke grenade, enemy models can see through it if they have MSV1. Another thing that's changed is that when it moves, if an enemy model can see it, or if it's not using stealth, for example, if it moves and then dodges or throws a smoke grenade, everybody with an 8 is going to get a free dodge where they can move 2 inches. So those are a couple of things which have made it now a little bit easier for enemies to get away from the Specular and sort of thwart his plans. But that's kind of niche. It's still a strong model. It's still very powerful. The ability to deploy in their deployment zone if you pass the check, or right next to it if you want to just walk up to them and kill them, makes this model great for killing a lieutenant or a tag, or a really just crucial model in their army, a data tracker maybe. Reason why I don't run the Specular that much is that I like to take the second turn often, and when you have to deploy the Specular Killer and they get an entire turn to reposition or just discover him and kill him, that's the situation where it's not as strong. However, having said that, the Avatar is just super stratosphere strong at the moment, and the Avatar combos well with the Specular Killer, who combos well with Kodali, and as you may have seen in some of my bat reps, Avatar plus Specular Killer plus Kodali is a brutal combo because the Avatar provides you all the extra orders, gives you Strategos 2, Specular deploys right next to them, you're much likely to get first turn, Specular can throw the smoke, Kodali comes in from the side, conveniently right there where the smoke is, and then you just go to town on them. So that is one tactic you can use, but you don't have to. You can always just do it the plain way and move in. One other thing I like about the Specular is that in a mission where it's just about controlling the quadrants and zones, if you feel the restraint is enough, you can actually deploy the Specular Killer inside a tall building in their half of the table and just not touch it for the entire game, and you'd always have 32 points in one of their zones, and they're always just sweating and struggling to make sure they have more than enough points in that zone to stop you from scoring, and still having to contend with the other zones you're actually committing your forces to at the same time. So without having to spend any orders at all, the Specular is creating that massive problem for them, which can really be worth it in that style of mission. Then we have the Zerat. The Zerat was an underused unit in the last edition. You certainly didn't take it very often in vanilla Combined Army. It was sort of like a Morat unit, and even Morats didn't take the Zerat very often. The Zerat's been significantly buffed by having Mimetism -6 instead of Mimetism -3. And its loadouts are still pretty good, and it's still relatively cheap. I think that if you're playing vanilla Combined, even though the Shroudeds are just gold, you might still consider going for the Zerat Red Fury occasionally, just because it can deploy so far out with infiltration, and as you're just moving to attack Warcores and Flash Pulse spots and enemy troopers like that, the chaff, they're trying to throw smoke grenades with their Morlocks and all of that, your ability to beat them with a burst form Zerat in good range band with BS11 going up to 14s to hit in a lot of cases, and imposing a -6 on their flash bots and TR bots and so forth, gives it a reasonable chance of doing some serious damage. It could be a bit hit and miss. Again, if you're going second, deploying out in the midfield makes it more vulnerable because it's not in marker state. Zerat hackers are a bit questionable because, again, they're sitting ducks if the enemy attacks them with the killer hacker in their turn, and you don't have the fallback of the marker state to hide behind. So I generally just take the Shroudeds way more often than, say, a Zerat. But I'm not going to dumpster this guy. I think that this is a very reasonable choice in Vanilla Combine at the moment. Especially the Red Fury. The Hackers, if you're able to restrain them a little bit. But even the Multi-Sniper. Because it's not an expensive Multi-Sniper. You've got Mimetism -6 and you have Infiltration. So if there's a big tall building on the side of the table, you stand on top of it prone, and when it's ready to attack, you just pop your head over the side and start shooting your sniper rifle. So it's a much more interesting unit than it was, much more reasonable than before. Not the best for its point slot or for that sort of job. I like the Calibans and the Shroudeds more than the Zerat. But if you are playing the Sectorial, like the Morat Sectorial, these guys are definitely more useful because you won't have access to the Shrouders and the Calibans. Greif Operator. I only ever take this bottom profile here, the impersonation guy. He's so cheap for a guy that can just deploy next to their deployment zone. Unlike the Speculo, he gets MSV1. So for shooting enemy flashball spots, which they are almost guaranteed to have, this guy is an absolute steal. You deploy him right next to the deployment zone, pop out of cover, maybe you kill a baggage spot, a couple of flashball spots, you hide again, and he has been well worth it. He's killed 3 orders. He's also good for the same reason the Speculo killer was, at just hiding somewhere and just adding his points to a zone and being very difficult to kill. Unlike a camo marker, he's not really setting off any crazy koalas and mad traps and stuff. I don't think he even set off mines because he counts as a friendly model to them. So that's pretty awesome. Just make sure that you know how to use him and know how to play him before you put him into the list. I generally don't build lists around him. I generally tend to add him in if I've got that extra SWC and a few extra points. He's also not wonderful if you're taking the second turn for the same reason the Speculo isn't. If you've just left him near to enemy territory, they can send something cheap over to him, just discover him and just bash him with a chain rifle or something, and he will fall flat a lot of the time. So be careful with him. But for 20 points, just such a steal. The other profiles are just a bit more difficult because then you're using it as an attack piece. It's an active turn shooting piece. And even though he's got forward deployment, there are other models that just do that job better. You can use your Nokias or your Shishkin models that can just rush up there quickly, or your Caliban Spitfire, Noctur for Spitfire, and it's just better to have the models with the awesome stats to be doing your shooting rather than these two guys, in my opinion. That's how I feel about those guys. Getting there. Sorry about the massively long video. We're on to Dachiratsu, Witch Soldiers, a staple of Combined Army. This is where your impetuous smoke-throwing guy comes from. Impetuous has been changed so that for some reason you don't have to use your full distance when going towards their deployment zone. You don't have to move at all. You can move in a bit of a, horizontal kind of direction. So long as you're not moving backwards, you're fine. So he's more maneuverable, he's more wieldy. At physical 14, you're planting a smoke on a 17. This guy is a must. If you are running the Toronted MSV3 HMG, you must have a Dachiratsu. Or if you're running the Mark Rep Tracker with HMG, you must have a Dachiratsu Witch Soldier. If you are really going to go the way of taking the Yaugat Sniper in your vanilla list, you need a Dachiratsu. But even in some lists which don't have MSV2, you're still wanting to take him because he's very good at getting to the midfield. He's an amazing close combat specialist. He can defend well. He's still only 14 points, so just enough to be a cheerleader. And he's somehow got a heavy pistol, unlike most cheap warbands. He's got smoke grenades and normal grenades, which, by the way, he's spec firing you on something like an 11, because Fizz 14 goes up to 17 with the range. -6 takes down to 11, so we can actually just bop somebody from the other side of a wall. Unlike other warbands, he's got +1 burst in his chain rifle, so where your Guangxi just lays down 1 chain rifle template, Dachiratsu lays 2 of them in the active turn. If they're dodging, he's hitting them with a heavy pistol. If you get into a face-to-face shootout where they're trying to shoot you with a combi rifle, you're throwing a smoke, they have the mimetism to go up against. So he's a more expensive warband. A lot of other guys that do this cost like 5 or 6 points. He costs 14, but he is worth it for those points because of his kit, his range of other abilities there. He's also picked up Berserk, which he didn't have before, so if you can see an enemy model less than 8 inches away, you move directly over into base contact with it. Your martial arts level 4 takes you up to strength 17 effectively with your DA weapon, and you're hitting on a 26 with +6 to hit. So he's very, very, very strong. At 14 points, if you've got enough cheerleaders, if you're not taking any MSV2, you don't have to bring him into your list. He's not an auto include, but he's very, very strong in just about any list. And if you do take MSV2, he's a must. Just don't take these other profiles because you're spending extra points, and you don't need to spend those extra points on a guy who's only BS 11. That's not what he's best at. He's best at just doing the short range stuff. Don't take the other profiles. Just take this one here. If you can afford an extra 4 points, you should be taking an Imitron or a Gaki. Speaking of Gakis, for just 4 points, you've got this guy who runs around the table at lightning speed, 6/6 speed. If he gets into close combat, that's CC20, which is nice. The only problem is that he doesn't have a gun. So the way to use him is to rush him into total cover somewhere and be in places where the enemy, if they walk past, he can start dodging on Phys 14, and nowadays he gets the reactive dodge where he can go 3 inches, because it's dodge +1, and if he does get shot and goes into unconscious, they don't have shock, he could explode on them, which is horrible for them. Best case scenario with the Gaki damage is you move up and you kill him in close combat, and you move into range of other things, they shoot you in panic, he explodes and kills even more things, and was worth 4 points. That's a great scenario. But in a lot of games, the only thing he'll do is he'll dodge around a bit and die, but he'll freak the opponent out into spending a couple of orders to try and outmaneuver him or kill him. And if your opponent has spent a couple of orders on something like Achilles or a tag, just trying to remove him so they can keep going without being tied up in close combat, then he's worth his weight in gold. So Gaki's very, very good. The only reason I don't take more of these guys is because the tiger creature, which we'll get to later, is even better at that. So that was the Gaki. The Preta, the cousin of the Gaki, this does have a gun. It's actually got a chain rifle. So what you're doing with the Preta is you're threatening them with close combat or the chain rifle. So if you move into the midfield, you hide prone behind cover, you're dodging once they come in range, you're getting into the way of them, you're forcing them to dodge your chain rifle rather than shooting you. Climbing plus means you can sort of do that from a rooftop, which is kind of hilarious, or just climb up the wall and hit them. One tactic I love with these guys is walking right next to the wall. There's somebody else prone on the roof. They are forced to take an ARO, which may be a dodge, and then you move another 6 inches up right in front of them. If they fail a dodge, you might just have gotten to close combat. That is a really horrible move that only the Preta and the Gaki can do. The Tiger can't, because Climbing Plus enables it. So these guys are very, very good, but again, at 7 points, even though I love this guy to death and I'd take him in a lot of lists, I actually don't really play this guy much at the moment, if at all, because the tiger creature is better. And we'll come to him last. Just before we do that though, the Osnat. The Osnat again has improved because Impetuous has improved, and that has also improved these 2 units as well, but again, the tiger creature is the one to take. But the Osnat gives you this sort of combination of smoke and a little bit of shooting. The Datratsi Witch Soldier is better in my opinion because it's cheaper, and the Datratsi doesn't really need to do any long-range shooting. This model can do long-range shooting, but again, it doesn't really need to. The reason why you want guys like this is to beat them in close combat and to throw smoke grenades. That's all you need them for. The saving grace of this model is the 6/4 speed, so at an extra 2 points, maybe it's worth it. The only profile I'd consider here, though, is the sensor version, because then you're bringing a Preta with you. This is the one time where I would take a Preta on my list. And you've got that combination of the speedy Osnat, the even faster Preta, and the sensor. And as you're charging across the battlefield, you can reveal hidden deployment models in the middle. You can reveal camo markers. You can work out what's the mine, what's not the mine. And then you can move in and attack them with your Vulcan shotgun or your Preta, or both at the same time. Sometimes within the cloud of a smoke grenade, and that can be very strong. But like the sensor bot we talked about earlier, it's not really worth it unless you feel like you're going to get a lot of mileage out of sensor. If the only thing you're going to be doing is walking across the table and threatening close combat, threatening them with your Vulcan shotgun, you're going to find it hard to get that value out of 27 points if you haven't used the sensor, is what I'm trying to say. Wow. Been talking for like 2.5 hours. I really need a break, but we've only got one more model to cover, and that is the tiger creature. Oh boy. So this is another top unit. There's no official unit for this at the moment, so you might want to wait a bit or use some sort of proxy. The big deal here is that this model is even better at dodging than the Gakis and the Predators. So these guys dodge on Fizz 14. This guy dodges on Fizz 16 because of dodge plus 3. And he dodges even further with the plus 2 inches. He's smaller. He's silhouette 1 rather than 2. But he also has 6th sense. So even a model with stealth can't stop him from dodging if they come within 8 inches. And that's what makes this guy the ultimate midfield harassment unit. With Impetuous and your irregular order, you get the Tiger up into midfield, you put him in total cover, and you put him near to the alleyways where enemies will approach from. Then once they come nearby, you dodge, presumably past your dodge. 6th sense means you're not at a penalty, as far as I remember. And then you move your full 4 inches out into the open, right in front of them, maybe into close combat with them. And that can just shut down some pushes. Imagine they're trying to come past a corner with a Sujian battle cap. Moves right up, you declare the dodge, you move in the way, and then, you know, it can't keep moving because you're sort of jamming the short, narrow path it was trying to get through. Or you just basically just stand in front of it and threaten to chain cold it unless it shoots at you. You're slowing it down. In the active turn, you can move, and if they shoot at you, you can dodge. And if you pass the dodge against their shot or their chain rifle blast, you can get into close combat, and they're in a lot of trouble there. You can berserk. So unlike the Gakis and the Predators, this guy can berserk, which means he can move 12 inches and then attack at CC21, which is brutal. And you know, you've got the choice of the AP plus shock, which is very powerful if you want to save the point, or probably even worse, the DA CC weapon. So you've got like a 10% chance to crit on either a 19 or a 20 because it's CC21. And that can just be devastating if you get in there. He can also be kind of in position as he starts just dodging around the table to combo with like a Datratsu Witch Soldier or Shishkin or your Caliban. And if they can both get in, then you've got the burst bonus. Imagine tying somebody up with a reactive turn Tiger and then charging in to kill with Nokias. Nokias getting burst 3 in that case. It's just brutal. So these guys are another sort of auto-include if you have the points in the right list, that is. So they're not really an auto-include. They should really be on this list. They just don't have a really good model at the moment to go out and buy, so I haven't recommended them. But these guys are a very important unit to be using in Vanilla Combined Army. Oh man, as you guys know, I do my videos in like one take, so if you've watched the whole thing start to finish, I congratulate you. I imagine most people will either only watch a little bit of this or just watch it in stages, but man, been talking for like 2.5 hours. Hope you guys enjoyed my Combined Army review. Combined Army is an amazing faction. I look forward to playing many more games and tournaments with them. They're a very fun and very characterful faction to play, and once you've started to master them, you can branch out into the sectorials and start to use some of the units here that I haven't really talked about very much, like the Nox Troopers or the Vanguard Morats, things like that, the Yaogats. So, all the best, guys. Good luck in your Combined Army games. Thanks for sticking with me for those of you who watched this entire video. Things will change with Combined Army over the years of N4, but a lot of the stuff is going to be the case. It's just going to be true for a long period of time as to what's hot, what's not. So hopefully this will help you in your games, and thanks again.